This is intentional also, by the way. I think Andrew realizes he's walked into a trap, and his whole argument is bullshit. They just got both hard muted, and I think he realizes that he's himself, because the rates are very high right now, and everybody knows about it. That's one of the things people complain about. Holy, a mortgage is so expensive. I'm pretty sure prime lending for mortgages is downstream from federal funds rate. Everybody knows interest rates are really high right now. I think he knows he's himself, and that's why he started spurging the microsecond his mic was unmuted, because he knows he's walked himself. Because he can't just say, oh, okay, I was wrong there, because he has to unwind so much of the argument that he just made now if he admits that he's wrong here. I have no clue how he's going to respond to Pisco. He could never back off this point, because he's going to lose. He has to unwind so much of his argument to do so, but let's see.
Have to be somebody else. It'll just have to be somebody else. Because Turk wants to talk. Okay.
Andrew just said that the Fed policy.
Why did you just let him filibuster?
What?
I was in the middle of my answer. You let the guy filibuster.
I'm sorry, it's chaos. You're gonna have to work with it. Work with it, Andrew. Work with it. He's gonna ask a question, then you're gonna respond. It just said you're gonna be able to respond, Andrew. You're gonna respond after. You're not debating the moderator. Either deal with the root, you gotta deal with the order, because there's chaos. Okay, you're both dominating. There's 6 other guests.
Is he gonna leave?
Means most of those people would be ineligible to vote. That means when you're considering voting, knowing this, you and all the people you know that are eligible to vote are actually losing jobs. Fourth, jobs are hardly important if real wages are going down, which real wages have been going down precipitously under the Harris-Biden administration. Now, to talk about some of the other things that were said here specifically, when it comes to sort of housing, let me ask you this question, Pisco. The same people that promised they were going to buy millions and millions or thousands of electrical vehicle stations, and were spending hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars doing that, how many did they end up building?
I'm not sure about that. I don't know how it's
okay. Another question. They also said, 3, right? Okay. And they also spent.
Who's the same people? What do you mean by the same people?
The Harris-Biden administration and the people that are actually running the show. Secondly, let me ask you another question. When those same people also promised that they were going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars for rural broadband, how many rural broadband people have been connected under that policy that spent hundreds of millions of dollars?
I don't know offhand. I don't know.
The answer is zero. The answer is zero to that. So what Andrew?
A lot of appropriations. Are you denying the appropriations were put towards public ends under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, or that there were great investments made under the Inflation Reduction Act?
I think that's deflecting what the central question here. The point that Andrew's trying to get to is it's easy to promise, oh, we're going to spend money that we're just going to create out of thin air to build a product that will benefit people. But the problem is that ends up causing inflation, which we can see is already the core problem of the Harris-Biden administration. And second, they rarely
brings down housing prices, Rob. Remember that.
I was bringing down housing prices causing inflation.
I'd like to continue my point. And secondly, they rarely deliver on the promises that they've given anyway. So we end up with massive inflation and the promises that they delivered not coming through. Now, to the more central point, again, you can see from the...
Hold on. Aren't these two positions inherently contradictory? Or I haven't listened to the whole argument. Is he arguing that they promised to spend a bunch of money, but they never actually spent it, but they're also still causing inflation at the same time? Wouldn't they have had to have spent the money to cause the inflation? Like, wouldn't the extra currency have to be circulating to cause the inflation in the first place? Or there might have been like a broader argument here that I'm not, because I didn't listen.
Opening statements from people like IRI that were shouting racism, talking about the cat story and things like that. Then you see from Pisco talking about threat to democracy January 6th, exactly as I said would happen in my opening statement. They know that despite the gaslighting that they've done, including decrying people that correctly called out the cognitive decline of Joe Biden, the American people do not believe the Harris-Biden administration when it comes to the important things such as the economy, such as immigration. And so they know that they have to deflect from talking about those things at any means possible. I'm sorry, the American people are not assuaged of their fears that Kamala's been there for 3.5 years and their real wages have gone down and they can't afford food and they can't afford housing and their border is porous and their cities are being overrun with people that are breaking the law and taking their resources. And this administration has done nothing but exacerbate that. But it's all solved because she had 20 seconds of policy positions when she said, we're going to give people free money and create houses.
We do need to get other people. Rob, we've said a lot of stuff.
This is a shell game. This is a shell game what they're doing. So Andrew asked for
after Pisco, I do want to go with IRI because he hasn't really said much.
Andrew asked for a specific policy. That's why we're
Pisco. Be respectful. Let IRI talk. Come on.
I said after Pisco, Andrew.
So Andrew asked for a specific policy perspective that we can talk about, and I offered one, and we were focusing on housing because that's where Andrew was taking the conversation. He wanted to get into the substance of the topics, and now Rob is decrying us and calling foul because we're focusing on that instead of Biden's cognitive decline. And you cannot win. Andrew is decrying the fact that we're lowering housing prices, and Rob's talking about inflation and worried about prices going up.
Both are true at the same time. So in areas where the low-income people come in, it's going to lower the value of the houses around, and it's also going to cause inflation.
I'm going to say. I'm going to finish what I'm going to say. So it sounds like these are a couple no-win scenarios. On the one hand, we want to talk about policy because that's what Andrew wanted us to get into. But obviously, Rob wants to talk about underlying deceit, and you can't trust administration. So pick what you want to talk about, and we can go.
We can talk about all of it, Pisco. It's not a one or the other. It's not a bifurcation. We can talk about all of it. All of it's a package deal. So if you have low-income people coming into the suburban neighborhoods, it's going to necessarily lower the housing prices, which are in that area. Guarantee it happens nonstop. Okay, that is where you get the phenomenon called white flight. That's why that happens. Also, on top of that, it is going to.
The problem is I know for a fact that Andrew doesn't have any economic foundation. So when Andrew is giving you an economic take, it's not because he's read something and incorporated that into his economic view of the world. He's just repeating something that he read somewhere, which isn't necessarily bad. But obviously, when it comes to economics, I would heavily second guess everything he says, not just because he doesn't have a fundamental understanding and is repeating other things, but I also know that he's like politically crazy, so he could be reading wild shit as well. I don't know if Rob has any economic understanding at all. I haven't heard him say anything. Ever since Andrew told me that removing all women from the workforce would just double the wages of all men, because you would just be doubling or you'd be reducing the workforce, basically you'd be cutting it in half. Therefore, the wages would necessarily double. Like, as soon as he said that, I could instantly eject every single economic take that Andrew has ever, like, there's, if you're willing to give that take and then defend it ironically, I know that you have absolutely no idea about anything relating to economics. The thing is, I'll hedge more carefully, but I shouldn't, because I know these guys, they know less than I do. Did you ever rebuttal to that argument in the moment? Yeah, my understanding of white flight, there are different types of white flight that you can talk about. In the past, white flight would very specifically refer to white people didn't want to live in areas with black people. It had nothing to do with property values. It had nothing to do with like black people being bad in neighborhoods. They just didn't want to live with black people. There used to be this tactic that Jewish real estate people would engage in called blockbusting, where what you would do is you would try to find one block, and you'd go to all these white people, and you'd start making crazy offers just to get one white family to move out. And if you could find one white family to move out, and you'd do this crazy offer, you'd move one black family in, all the rest of the white people would start offering to sell their homes because they didn't want to live near the N-words. They didn't want to be there. And you would get this thing called blockbusting, and it would cause some degree of white flight. I've also heard, not gerrymandering. Gentrification is referred to as like white flight as well, where you just have areas. No, that wouldn't be white flight. I feel like I've heard white flight in association with gentrification. Gentrification is usually white people going to an area. So I don't know what he's referring to there when he says white flight. If he just thinks that just black people moving someplace necessarily just reduces property values, and that's why the white people leave. The problem is, I don't want to say Andrew's a racist. I don't know if I've heard him give takes that are just blatantly racist. I know he's weird, but gentrification is technically the opposite. Is white people coming in, or wealthy people, affluent people who tend to be white, but
Cases which are in that area, guarantee it happens nonstop. Okay, that is where you get the phenomenon called white flight. That's why that happens. Also, on top of that, it is going to increase inflation when you artificially increase the supply by 3 million homes. Pisco, both are true at the same time. Pisco.
When you're talking about economics, I think that you have to be. I try not to. I don't even know if I use these terms anymore. You got to be really careful when you talk about artificially increase or decrease. Like when we say artificially increase or decrease, what do we mean by that? Like if you artificially increase the supply or artificially decrease the supply or artificially increase the demand or artificially decrease the demand, I think in specific cases you can talk about that. Like setting like price caps or price floors can cause external impacts in the market because you're just capping something artificially with some kind of like actual government policy. But you just need to be really careful when you say like artificial. Yeah, the whole economy is made up. That's reductive, but like if you provide incentives for builders to build in a certain city, like let's say you say, oh, if you build here, like would you consider this artificial increase in supply? Like let's say that you say, oh, we'll give $10,000 worth of tax deductions for companies that want to build somewhere. Is that an artificial increase in supply? I mean, like kind of, but I mean the supply is actually increasing. People will come in and buy. There's going to be other external effects, negative and positive, depending. Yeah, I'd be really, really careful when you're using words like artificial increase, artificial decrease. Like,
Also, on top of that, it is going to increase inflation when you artificially increase the supply by 3 million homes. Pisco, both are true at the same time. Pisco.
I don't know when he means increase the supply by 3 million homes. He must mean, because that would decrease inflation.
Housing supply is going to increase inflation. Help me there.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Oh, no. Is this guy about to bail him out? He should just say I misspoke. He either misspoke or he has something fundamentally disconnected here in terms of his understanding of what inflation means.
Inflation when you artificially increase the supply by 3 million homes. Pisco, both are true at the same time. Pisco.
Increasing housing supply is going to increase inflation. Help me there.
What's crazy?
I want to wait. Sorry,
where does the money come from? Pisco.
We're throwing it over to Ira.
Does the government spend the money? Pisco.
Yeah.
Wait, first, there's a question to Pisco, so now Pisco has to respond because you asked a question. So Pisco.
Yeah, so I understand that government expenditures can be inflationary in nature.
No kidding.
Let me finish.
Hold on.
Yeah, so I understand that government expenditures can be inflationary in nature.
No kidding.
Government expenditures can be inflationary or are inflationary in nature. I feel like that's also really reductive, but okay. I mean, like, it could be technically true. But like, let's say, for instance, let's say that like the government collects $1 million in tax receipts, and then let's say that the government spends $500,000. He said it can be. No, he was saying that it's no. Shut the fuck up. Andrew is saying that it's necessarily inflationary. But like, let's say the government collects $1 million in tax receipts or in revenue, and then the government spends $500,000. Is the government spending there inflationary? I mean, like, technically kind of true. Like, if they didn't spend any money at all, it would be less inflation. But it's again, it's like, it's a reductive, stupid. I think that's reductive and stupid.
Let me finish.
If you're going to make a positive claim that there's a strong relationship or a good relationship, whatever you want to say, between the policy proposed by Harris.
No, Pisco said it can be. Oh, sure. It can be. It could be. Yeah, Pisco's right. But Andrew's saying like all government spending is bad or all government spending is inflationary. It's like, it's true in the most reductively stupid sense possible, right?
Let me finish.
If you're going to make a positive claim that there's a strong relationship or a good relationship, whatever you want to say, between the policy proposed by Harris, and you have to make it. You know, like Trump's policy of tariffs, a 10% tariff across the board is also in principle inflationary. But don't you have to make a case? Don't you have to make a showing that it's going to noticeably increase more than the any kind of countering effects that other kinds?
Well, I mean, that was a nice whataboutism. Pisco doesn't answer my question.
Or increases in taxes. You know, I'm not sure that it's going to noticeably increase inflation. I'm not sure about that. That's your case you have to make.
Well, Pisco, can we start?
I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry.
I have to say, Andrew, my feelings are hurt for you to call me a liberal scumbag. I thought we were cool. I still love you, but that's okay.
Nice to see you again, IRI. How are you?
I'm good.
I noticed your anti-Semitic remarks you made towards Laura Loomer. That wasn't very nice, IRI.
Well, I'm Jewish, so it's kind of hard for me to be anti-Semitic, but okay.
And his ideas to his family, you know?
But I'm happy for your success. You've been doing great, so I'm happy for you. As far as the jobs go, there are 5 million more jobs in America today than February 2020 before the pandemic. And you guys said these are because people have 3 jobs. But the thing is, we've had a record unemployment rate. It's been below 4%, or it was below 4% for a record stretch we haven't seen since the 60s. We hit record unemployment 3.4% below even what Trump accomplished. So I feel like a lot more people in this country are employed. And this isn't the case that you guys portray. Everybody's got a part-time job.
At Destiny, it can be inflationary, but that can be good sometimes, depending on the state of the economy. Andrew seems to imply inflation is always bad. I don't even know if government's, the thing is, I don't know if it would necessarily even be inflationary, because if your economy is growing, like your total inputs and outputs are growing, and your government spending at the same time, I feel like I can conceive of ways to government spend that wouldn't necessarily be inflationary. Like, let's say that you brought in 1,000 workers to start like working on some military base or some bullshit, and then you paid them a whole bunch of money, or not a whole bunch of money, you paid them money or whatever to bring them in. So this is just pure government spending. So money is going in there. But it's not entering the economy in other ways, or in certain ways to inflate certain asset classes. I'm trying to think if because then they would be spending the money in the economy, so it would be, but they'd also be producing stuff too. I don't know if, I'm not sure if. Let me think of a better example. Let me think for a second. The thing is, like, one person couldn't come in and produce every single asset class where you'd see inflation, so it's hard to imagine. But like, I don't think I would say, I don't know if I would feel that government spending is always going to be inflationary. It's always going to lead to inflation. Like, I feel like there are other factors in the economy where the government can spend money in certain ways that could be more inflationary. The government can spend certain money in other ways that would grow the economy in a way that wouldn't be seen as inflationary. It probably just depends on the way you spend, would be my guess. But also, yeah, inflationary isn't always necessarily a bad thing either, too.
Everybody has a part-time job, but I just what's crazy. Well, then that's wrong. Everybody's got a part-time gig, a side gig, a side hustle. Yeah, I don't believe your numbers, even if you show them to me. I know too many people in my everyday life, even if it's Sandoso, you can just go ask anybody. Everybody.
The workers would obviously use that money in the economy. Sure, but the workers can also create other things that are being purchased in the economy, right? Like, I guess this would be my question. Let's say that you have an economy where there are 100 people, and let's say that those 100 people buy 100 apples a year, right? Let's say that the government spent money to bring in 50 people, okay? But those 50 people produced another 100 apples. Well, 100 people buying 100 apples a year, if you bring in 50 more people, well, if the government is funding them, the total cost of an apple, you would expect it to increase, because now you've got 150 people chasing the same 100 apples, and the government is giving money to those other 50 people. But if they're producing 100 more apples, and now there's 200 apples for 150 people, maybe the price might go. So I don't know if it would necessarily be inflationary. That's what I'm saying. I don't know if, because as your economy grows, the way the government can spend money could theoretically not cause inflation? I'm not sure how you would even. I'm just saying that the relationships are probably more complicated than just government spending equal inflationary, equal bad, equal
Got to do two things.
Why do you not
Everybody has to. Because you can go ask 10 random people at HEB or Walmart or wherever, and they all will tell you they're doing two things. And there's no way that this sample size. Sure, it's anecdotal, but when it's every time, listen, we've already caught you cooking the books of the job numbers. Why would I believe you with this 5% bullshit?
You understand?
I mean, it's clear that y'all are lying. Y'all lied about Biden. Y'all lied about Biden. Y'all every time y'all say Kamala's got a policy, half the time it's just Trump's policies. Listen, it sounds like you got two.
There is still more total money in the economy, so your analogy doesn't work. Why does total money in the economy matter if there's more total goods and services as well that you can spend money on?
Half of nothing. And what basically that equals out to is a whole lot of nothing. And y'all are sitting here just trying to pass off vagaries and nebulous policy and buzzwords like opportunity economy and say we're going to fix it. Well,
why? I don't know why this guy's ever invited to anything. He doesn't. He just seems like. I don't know why he's ever on any of these things.
Well, Trump asked a valid question. Hey, 3.5 years, y'all ain't done shit. It's only got worse. Why has it been fixed since then? And nobody's been able to answer that here. Y'all just keep saying, oh.
Does anybody want to answer that question?
I would like to ask, what is your guys' solution for the housing crisis? Because
before you skip over to the what about, can you answer his question?
Why haven't you fixed everything?
His question is,
first time we didn't have a transition with the previous administration. Donald Trump took a giant dump on the floor and set everything up for disaster. So they had to do a little bit of cleanup work.
Wait, let him finish. Wait. Gibbs got to finish. Ira gets to finish.
Let me finish. The whole world has been suffering through economic problems. This is not an American-centric thing. So we've done pretty well compared to the rest of the world.
We sure have. And what's more, in 2 years, we've only had Congress for 2 years. And those 2 years, there's a ton of bipartisan legislation passed. The CHIPS Act, the Infrastructure Act, the other kind of weird gun legislation that was bipartisan in nature.
Y'all had the presidency for 12 of the last 16 years, Pisco. Like, what do you mean? Like, y'all had a leader of the free world and it's been this dog shit for like all the whole time.
Why doesn't it turn into a civics lesson? You understand that Congress is the one that passes
a civics lesson? Okay, do you know what executive orders are? Like, yeah, I mean, you act like they don't have any control.
When we try to do major executive action, for example, and you may not agree with underlying policy, but Biden made a promise with student loan, and you might say that that's stupid or whatever. But when the administration tries to do stuff, who are the first people suing? It's Republican governors, Republican individuals. They're trying to stop as much as they can.
Great, Pisco. They don't put anything on Trump's feet if they talk to Congress, Pisco. If it's all Congress, then don't put it on Trump's feet.
In fact,
but Trump had both houses of Congress, so Trump can't really use that excuse, right?
But it's not to say the president doesn't have a lot of power. They do.
No, he has a lot of power. 10 seconds ago, he had barely anything to do with anything. Now suddenly he has a lot of power.
And they just lied again. You just got a source saying that 54% of Americans are doing side jobs now.
Let's let Pisco finish.
They're just lying.
In terms of the economy, the presidency can obviously, I guess, in terms of chain of command, you have the Federal Reserve there, which has a lot of influence on prices, that kind of thing. But in terms of direct appropriations and kind of major legislation, tax changes, that's all coming through Congress. The president has some role in what they can do with the administrative state. That's all things that you guys don't agree with.
Man, are you tired from backpedaling, Pisco?
And there's no backpedaling whatsoever.
Backpedaling. 10 seconds ago. The president has all the power.
You got like Papa. That's what you're doing.
You guys are asking.
Andrew is so good when it comes to like debate, like rhetoric, like argumentation. Like he's good at that, but he's so dumb. It's very like it's an annoying mismatch of Andrew is what people accuse me of being, where he can be like very entertaining, very snappy. He's good at like doing the hardcore, debate argumentation stuff, but he never has great information to back up any of what he's saying. It's very annoying. Are all conservatives just ignorant on civics? To be fair, nobody knows anything about civics. I barely know anything about civics. And that's only after reading all these cases and everything.
Asking, for example, why haven't they done the housing thing in the 4 years? They haven't had Congress.
Okay, I know there's a Rob, I know you've been waiting. Rob, wait, guys, please. Okay, I know, Rob, you want to talk, but Turk has been waiting, and Joe has been waiting very patiently. I have you after them. I just wanted to make sure I check with them. Turk, were you still waiting, or has the moment passed?
I can still bring it back to the topic that you brought up, Dylan, if you'd like me to do that.
Could I do Joe first, because it might be relevant?
Sure, yeah.
Joe?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Pisco, for having to push at you too. A little frustration that I do have with the Biden-Harris administration, and then by extension, now the Harris administration, and Rob brought this out a little bit in his argumentation, is that there are still issues within underserved communities that haven't been actualized and promised. And something that I wish was clearly articulated in the Harris administration would be something like, to get very sort of specific, we saw in New Jersey about a drop in monthly revenue from hospitals across the board, anywhere from 30 to 40%. And that's a little bit higher in more underserved areas like Camden and Newark. And something that the person I voted for the Senate, Larry Ham, was advocating for was an expansion of the infrastructure bill to cover things like emergency centers and hospitals, which is something currently doesn't exist in the infrastructure bill as currently. So that's a frustration that I have with the Harris administration. And if we want to get really specific in the ideas of
Biden administration, you mean?
What did I say? What's the
Harris administration?
In the Biden administration. Oh, that's like.
Yeah, it's really difficult to differentiate the two nowadays, isn't it?
I mean, that's not
considered he's on the beach every day,
That's not here or there the misspeak, but my concern there is that there are things that could help, and I think it is legitimate to question the 3 million houses plan.
If I may jump in, because I do have something to add on this specific point. So to the points that were addressed here.
Can I finish my house thing and then I'll land the plane and go see Rob? Is that all right? Or. Yeah. So like the thing is, like we saw, for example, like in the housing crisis, right? For black households, about 8% of black households were lost during that from 2008. Something that I think could have been really cool to hear and see is an acknowledgement from whether it be the Biden administration or the Harris campaign articulating that. Because something that would be cool to have coupled along with that is in those sort of first buyer initiatives and stuff like that, to include individuals who lost their home during those foreclosures for people with subprime mortgages. That I think would be a very easy rhetorical thing that could move a lot of people in the center. A lot of people in the center probably were affected by that statistically, which obviously would have an impact for black voters in particular, but also to all voters who were affected by that. You know what I'm saying?
I'm gonna let Rob. I have a response, but I just want to let Rob talk.
Oh, sure. Nice, good stuff. Okay, to respond to this, first I'm going to go where I'll get to right to what Joe said there, sort of in the spirit of it. But notice how in all of this talk about jobs, I can talk about the specific job numbers. Yes, unemployment numbers look like they're doing okay. That's because it doesn't count people that are no longer trying to get work. Labor force participation is still lower than it was in pre-pandemic levels.
Okay, yeah, Rob doesn't know anything about economics either. I'm so sorry. Okay. Just as a quick thing, okay? When we talk about unemployment in the United States, there are different numbers that you can talk about. There are different ways that you can measure unemployment. So, for instance, let's imagine an economy with 100 million people. And let's say that 50 million people are working in that economy, okay? Well, is that 50% unemployment? Well, let's think for a moment. Okay. Do we count people under the age of 18, right? Should we count a 1-year-old as being unemployed? Well, okay. Probably not. Okay, so let's, knock off children. What about people who are over the age of retirement, over 65, right? Okay, sure. Probably not. What about people who are, let's say you have a mom who's staying at home, who's taking care of a kid. Or let's say that you've got a guy who, financial independence and retire early, whatever, one of these people, right? Let's say that they retire at 35 or 40. Or let's say that you've got, 3 or 4 roommates, they're all living together, and one guy's like, I'm going to take a year off. I got money saved up. Fuck it. I don't care. I'm not going to work. I'm just going to hang out, whatever. Do you want to count these people in your unemployment numbers if they're not looking for work, right? Probably not. So there are different ways, or you could if you wanted to. There are different ways to measure unemployment. I think they use all the U's, at least 1 through 6. But the way that we refer to unemployment in the United States is usually called the U3 number, okay, which is our shorthand for unemployment. Unemployment rate in the United States is the U3 unemployment, which excludes people not seeking work from that number, okay? Now, every now and then, somebody will come out and somebody will give this ingenious take where they're saying, well, actually, that's not the real unemployment in the United States. Actually, the number's actually way fucking higher, and nobody's actually talking about this, okay? And they're usually citing something like, I don't know if it's called the U6. I think U6 and labor force participation rate are different, but these numbers basically always track each other. Like if you overlap them, if you look at them, like they're generally pretty similar. You're not getting these massively huge spikes in U6 in a way that has never been seen before, like U3. No, they're generally like they kind of track. When you talk about something like, let's look at the St. Louis Fed Labor Force Participate, LBPR. How is the U6 different? I think the U6 includes, labor force participation rate. Wait, right? I think the U6 includes discouraged workers. I don't know what other types of workers they include, but to be honest, you're dating yourself. Nobody says that shit talking point. Rob literally just said this shit talking point. Let me check real quick. What is labor force participation rate? Wait. It's defined by the current population survey as the number of people in the labor force as a percentage of the civilian non-institutional population. The participation rate is a percentage of the population that is either working or actively looking for work. I'm trying to think if this is the one that includes, wait. I'm thinking this is the one that has senior citizens factored in, right? Investopedia. Hold on one second. The U.S. government's labor force participation rate formula is the number of people age 16 and older who are employed or actively seeking employment divided by the total non-institutionalized civilian working age population. Okay. So one thing to keep in mind as you get more and more people that are getting older, because our population is a little top heavy, I think because of the baby boomers, even if everything in the economy more or less stays the same per age bracket as a percentage, you would expect to see labor force participation rate drop off a bit because older people are more likely to be retired and not wanting to work anymore than younger people. But I believe labor force participation rate will still factor these people in. So when you're looking at this here, you're seeing that the labor force participation rate is lower, 62, 63%, than it was throughout the 80s, 90s, 2000s. This is to be expected somewhat. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that that the number right now is good or that these numbers were bad. I'm just saying that labor force participation, when somebody pulls this number out, you need to be very suspicious of why are we talking labor force participation rate. You're probably going to need to bring another number out if we're going to talk about this, because this number here is going to be heavily biased towards certain age groups of people. That's just a thing to keep in mind. Whenever you hear somebody bring up the secret unemployment numbers, like the forbidden unemployment that nobody's allowed to talk about, usually they're talking about labor force participation rate, and there's a reason why we don't usually use that number to just take a snapshot of the economy. Yeah.
What happened was a lot of numbers. I'm going to go where I'll get to right to what Joe said there, sort of in the spirit of it. But notice how in all of this talk about jobs, I could talk about the specific job numbers. Yes, unemployment numbers look like they're doing okay. That's because it doesn't count people that are no longer trying to get work. Labor force participation is
like unemployment has never counted people. Well, or I don't know when the U3 started, but unemployment doesn't count people not looking for work. U3 unemployment has always been like that. When you talk about unemployment rate in the United States, you're talking about the U3. The U3 doesn't include discouraged workers. It hasn't. It just doesn't. That's just not how the U3 works. Okay, I don't know, but it doesn't give the definition here, but yeah. But the U3, when people talk about unemployment rate in the United States, it just doesn't. It just doesn't measure discouraged workers, people not seeking work.
It's still lower than it was in pre-pandemic levels. What happened was a lot of people got so frustrated after the lockdowns and things like that they never tried to go back to work. In addition to increased welfare benefits and PPP loans and other stimulus checks that were sending them, many people never went back to work. So unemployment numbers look way better than they actually are. The real unemployment number is probably around 7%. And none of
like saying anytime somebody says real unemployment, they're always full of shit. That's always a fucking lie. When somebody says real unemployment, that means that they're engaged in some propaganda bullshit every single fucking time. There were people that quit after COVID and didn't come back, but a lot of those people are also people that were just like, fuck it, I'm retiring now and I'm done. I'm out, right? You can, somebody linked this. Yeah, I don't know how PPP loans are making people not go back to work. PPP loans were offering money to employers to literally keep people on payroll, so I don't know what that means. Well, I do. It means he's full of shit. Population pyramid for the United States, 2000, 2010, and 2020. So you can kind of see, I guess you've got like this bump here of people that are getting older from 40 to 39. You've got this little bump here that I think this is 2010. So 35 to 44, this bump moves up here from like 49 to 54, and now it's moved up here from like 59 to 64. This is 2020, I guess, right? So as it gets, as time moves on and this bump moves up, again, labor force participation rate is going to drop, but that's not bad. It just means we've got more older people who are probably going to be retired, right? And we're not making as many younger people. So
none of that matters anyways. The fact that you have to work multiple jobs and we count each of those multiple jobs as a job, but people's still real wage growth is barely moving.
I don't know what that had to do with anything, but okay.
The needle since the Harris-Biden administration, where under Trump it was going up by leaps and bounds. So people know, and that's why all the polling shows that people feel they were economically better under the Trump administration than under the Harris-Biden administration, which is why what I said, which Pisco deflected from, was no one wants to talk about that. Instead, you'll talk about one random policy. Oh, they're going to spend money and build houses, that's it. And the rest of it will be, as you've seen IRI try to do here, make excuses that in the first term, congressional term, when Harris and Biden were there, where they controlled the House and had the tiebreaker in the Senate, they didn't do any of this shit. And what
I'm pretty sure they were probably trying to take the country up from underneath the avalanche that was COVID, that the entire world was dealing with. Wouldn't that be a self-report on Trump admin too, since they also use the same U3? Everybody uses U3. Yeah, that's the unemployment rate. Everybody uses the U3. It's stupid whenever somebody says real unemployment and they're not an economist, or they could be an economist and they're talking shit too, but yeah.
What's IRI's response to that? Well, that's because Trump didn't have a peaceful transition of power. Exactly. What they're trying to do is cover for Harris, which is why she's not out there talking to the American people, talking to adversarial press. She's hiding, just like Biden hid, because they can't defend their record. And to the extent that they're trying to come up with policies, most of it's just cribbing things Republicans and Trump have said, to the point where even Joe Lewis correctly points out he's frustrated as a lefty that Harris is actually on stage talking about how she supports gun rights. They always become more Republican because they understand that their policies will not get them elected, which is why Bernie Sanders said the other day, oh, in reality, what's going on is Harris has to say what she needs to say to get elected. Exactly. That's how bad she is. She's a chameleon. It's ran by people behind her. She's not really doing anything. So the question I have for Pisco, to pivot off what Joe's saying, is one, when Harris was there and was basically running the show because Biden had dementia, which you and all of the Democrats covered up.
What did the Democrats go for major gun legislation with Biden in office? Were there any attempts by, I'm trying to think, I know there were some big shootings. I know they pay lip service to it sometimes, but like, were there any big things right now the Democrats tried to pass legislation relating to guns that made it out of either chamber? There was one idea for an assault weapons. Yeah, there was an idea for an assault weapons ban, but I feel like it never has enough support in the Democratic Party. I don't think these things ever get anywhere.
For because you're liars that don't care about democracy. Why didn't she do any of these policies like create massive amounts of houses? Why did the policies that they pushed through end up leading to massive inflation? Why did they lie to people over and over again and say actually the economy is great when people were struggling miserably? And even if they couldn't have got it done through
the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. Let's see. Clarification of federal firearms license requirements. So this is for FFLs. That's a pretty small percentage of the population. Funding for state red flag laws. That could be a big deal, depending on what those look like. Partial closure of the boyfriend loophole and straw purchases. Maybe this could count. I would have to see the specific provisions, but I feel like I haven't heard conservatives complain about this much. I feel like if there were big gun things in here, I feel like I would have heard about it complained a lot more, because I feel like I've never heard a complaint from Republicans about this. It was introduced by Marco Rubio, sure.
through Congress in the past 2 years. I disagree with that because they basically got everything they wanted in the Inflation Reduction Act, which was basically Green New Deal light, as Joe Biden admitted the other day. And lastly, they tried to push through shit in the Congressional or executive orders that they knew would be overturned, like the bailouts of student loans. So why didn't they try executive orders to build housing and to reduce inflation? The truth is because they didn't give a shit, just like they lie to, maybe you'll appreciate this, Joe, black Americans every election year. For 2 years, they don't give a shit about black Americans until it's an election year, and then all of a sudden they pretend to give a shit. They don't care about people in rural America, and then all of a sudden they pretend to give a shit. Why didn't they do these amazing things? None of you have an answer. The Democrats were in charge. Harris was in charge, and she didn't do shit.
Next question, Rob.
Okay, that was an extensive question, and I don't just want to throw it to Pisco because I want to throw it to other people too. But one moment, I do also want to say, if you want to ask questions to anybody on the panel or the panel itself, donate your questions, put a message, and the highest ones will get read. We're shilling here.
I understand that the BPS chat. This chat crazy. They're about to donate and say some crazy questions.
It's an interesting point to me that you guys want to pick a fight on policy when it came to the debate. What policies did Trump articulate during that debate besides?
Wait, are you surprised?
Let's let Ira finish. Rob went for a bit. I want to hear an extended response.
Why are we doing what about his answer to this question?
Cavalcade nonsense.
If you answer this question, he asked a question. Can you answer to it? Legislation passed. Biden got way more legislation passed during his first 2 years than Trump did. The very first thing that Trump tried to do when he was president was repeal and replace Obamacare. He failed. The next.
What is the actual defense a Democrat can give as to why so many Americans are struggling? There is none. You have to thread the needle on that so unbelievably fucking carefully. It's hard to speak to that because the reality is most Americans aren't struggling, but people feel that way and they talk about it a lot on social media. So you have to be incredibly careful how you talk about that because you have to feed into the delusions of the public while also being realistic and reasonable. Remember, there's a ton of Republicans that thought that the economy flipped completely 180 the very microsecond Biden assumed office, and then all of a sudden the economy became horrible. And it's like, wait, really? But so yeah, I don't know. There are issues with the economy, and there are issues that need to be addressed, especially stuff probably relating to housing, maybe education. But people that have this idea that like everything is unaffordable and everything is fucked, and when it's just not, it doesn't show up in any data anywhere. And then people spend all this time trying to like, well, it's just like, yeah, it's a difficult needle to thread.
Next thing he did was the tax cuts that the Republicans have been clamoring to do for decades. And then what did he get done after that? What were his major signature pieces of legislation? You really want to compare the legislative track record between Biden and Trump?
During your question, why hasn't Biden admin removed the Trump tariffs? Colin was asked about this, but she somewhat dodged the question of the debate. I don't even know which Trump tariffs there were or what hasn't been removed. I'm not sure. We can find out. Trump tariffs. Could things be better for people even if it isn't horrible? Things can always be better. Yeah, of course. There must be like a State Department website where you can see like all the current U.S. tariffs or something, right? I would imagine. Image not familiar. Oh, somebody made a post on the subreddit about this. Oh, okay. This would have been what I thought, but oh, this is true as well. Even though tariffs are bad economic policy, people do like tariffs. They sound good in principle. It sounds awesome because nobody really knows what a tariff is. But if you start tariffing and then you get retaliatory tariffs, you can't really just get rid of your tariff. You have to reach an agreement with the other side so that you both get rid of them. Otherwise, you're going to fuck yourself over. Yeah.
Trump?
Yeah, give me 30 seconds. Okay, give me 30 seconds. I'll answer this. Because what Kamala Harris is running on is being an agent of change. What you can't get around is the American people know that economically and security-wise, they were better off under a Trump administration than a Harris administration. So what's happening is the Harris administration is trying to run on, we're the agents of change. Things will be different. To why I say then why, if she's been there in charge for 4 years, haven't they done any of these things?
I wonder if anybody will ever deal with the fact that Republicans never have to answer for their wild deficit spending. If the economy was so fucking good under Donald Trump, why did he have to deficit spend so much? Why couldn't they balance the budget? When Donald Trump's first budget would have been after 2017? Like, why did we have to have these? Can I go back a little further? Didn't Obama reduce the deficit by 2/3? No shot. Obama definitely deficit spent. Federal surplus or deficit. Okay, so surplus is above the line. And then deficit is below the line, right? Like, why was Donald Trump still deficit spending? This seems so dumb. Didn't Obama reduce the deficit by 2/3? I'm sorry. I mixed up deficit with debt. Obama did reduce the spending deficits through his administration. I'm trying to think, I don't know when the first budget you would take credit for is. So like, would it be 2008 or would it be 2009? Like, I don't know how these are measured, but obviously you had the housing collapse. Obama's obviously deficit spending. You're supposed to after a recession or during a recession, right? But then the deficit is decreasing, it's decreasing up until around 2015, 2016, it increases a bit again. And then under Donald Trump, why? All this additional deficit spending. It's getting worse, but the economy was getting better. Why? Like, the economy was doing really well under Trump, sure, but it was in part, at least, due to the massive deficit spending. Can you explain what deficit spending is? Deficit spending is, basically a budget for the government is, let's say that I collect $1 million in, if I knew how to use Excel, I could draw such a pretty graph of this. Let's say that for 1 year, let's say that I collect, let's call this $1 million in tax receipts, and let's say that I spend $900,000, all right? Then let's say the next year, let's say I collect $1 million in tax receipts, and then let's say that I spend, we'll say $1.1 million. then let's say the next year, let's say we do a big tax cut. Let's say that we only get $800,000 in tax receipts. And then let's say that we spend $1 million. So you would say that for this first year, you could say we had a $100,000 surplus, a budget surplus. You'd say for this year, you had a $100,000 budget deficit. And then for this year, maybe you'd say we had a $200,000 budget deficit, okay? What that means is that the government in the very first year, I guess maybe you could say the government like deleted currency from the economy. I think it's fair to say that, right? Because the government took in $100,000 and the government's not spending that money. So if you were to have if you were to draw a graph of like the government debt, right? We'll say debt, like money the government owes. Let's say that we're starting at 0. We'll say that the government is sitting on an extra 100K. Let's say that the next year we have $100,000 that the government spends extra. I don't think you would accrue any debt. You wouldn't have to issue any bonds because the government is literally just has this money sitting here, right? I don't know if it sits in a bank account or what. I mean, we've always had a debt, so I don't even know. But like you've got a wash between $100,000 surplus, $100,000 deficit, and then the next year here we have a $200,000 deficit in the budget. That means that the government has to issue debt in order to raise the money to spend that in the economy. So we have a $200,000 worth of debt. Let's say that next year the government spends and takes in the same amount of money. You'd still have this national debt, but your budget deficit would be nothing. So budget deficit is just the difference between the amount of money that you take in as the government and the amount of money that you spend as the government. Yeah. Isn't it the ultimate rhetorical blunder for Dems to pretend the economy is rough when it's not, when Republicans always say Dem economy is bad and Republican economy is good, no matter what the fact of the matter is? When the economy is the most important issue, you can't concede it on. Yeah, I don't know how you deal with that. I'm not sure. The thing is, Democrats have to play in this world. The double standard is impossible. You can't survive in a double standard world. And Republicans can always say their economies are great, and they can always say the Democratic economies are horrible, and they never get punished or fact-checked, or because Republican voters go by vibes based on how they think the economy is doing. So you're fucked. Yeah, right. I don't know how you deal with that. Yeah. Could deficit spending be thought of as another form of increasing the financial burden on citizens and another form of taxes? No. The government, it's kind of hard or weird to think about this, but government spending has nothing to do with taxes, and it has nothing to do with money from your citizens. The government spending has absolutely nothing to do with the amount of money that the government takes in. They're technically completely different things. But if the government is spending more than they take in through money, then they have to issue debt in order to cover the expenditures. Now, if the government is taking in more money than they're spending, arguably that's more taxing on the citizens, because it means citizens gave up more in taxes than what the government would need to cover their expenditures. But if the government is spending more, then you have to pay that back in the future. You don't have to. Well, you kind of have. You should. You probably have to. Nobody knows right now. But you have to pay that back in the form of interest payments and in the form of paying debt back in the future. So, so extra expenditures help the economy and they help citizens, but it has to be paid back at some point probably. But there's nothing wrong with deploying debt, even that you have to pay back in the future, because you could have a net present value plus investment means that it's better to spend the money now and assume debt than it would be to just not spend any of the money and not grow your economy instead. But that's more fundamental economic bullshit. Yeah. Can you explain what taxes? I don't know what that question means. Do you think people feel like the economy is bad because they're seeing inflationary results in the commodities that they most often buy? Like if the stock market is shit, not everybody's going to feel it immediately. But if the price of a Big Mac rose by $4, then everyone is going to say the economy is shit. Yeah, I mean, things like that. There are items like that people see the price go up and they feel bad about it. But people are also just retarded. I don't know what else to say. I remember my grandpa used to say to me shit like, yeah, when I was growing up, gas was like 50 cents or whatever a gallon. And now look, it's like $2. It's crazy. And I was like, okay, grandpa, but when you were growing up, I mean, like $1 was worth a lot. Like things were different, right? Like people don't intuitively understand inflation. It just feels bad. And then what do you do? Yeah. So deficit is based on the yearly budget, while debt refers to each cumulative year. Yeah, instead of deficit, you should just think of it as a shortfall. A deficit is a budget shortfall, and a budget surplus means that you got more money than you needed to spend. It's a surplus, right? But the debt and the deficit are two different things. That's why Bill Clinton, we still had a big national debt, but he was posting budget surpluses. But when somebody says like Obama cut the budget deficit, that means that Obama is decreasing the amount of new debt being accrued every single year, or I'm sorry, accrued. No, incurred. He's decreasing the deficit that he's incurring is decreasing, meaning he's borrowing less and less every year, but the debt is still increasing every single year because there's still money being borrowed. It would be like saying I cut down on my credit card spending. I spent $10,000 last month and only $5,000 this month, but you're still spending on a credit card, if that makes sense. Yeah. Isn't the issue that people have with inflation is that people's wages aren't keeping up with the inflation rate? Maybe, but it's really, 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 really hard to measure. It's hard to measure all of that. All of it is incredibly difficult to measure because we've gone over this before. Like there are some things that it's hard to capture this on a graph. It's hard to capture it in an individual's life. It's hard to capture a lot of this stuff. Like for instance, so like you have this weird thing happening where during COVID, real median wages were at like all-time highs. So that seems really good. But then I think Rob might have just even used this talking point. Wages haven't recovered in the Biden and Harris administration. Real median wages have indeed fallen. But again, you have to think about the number. You have to think about what we're measuring here. The median weekly wages, the median number, the middle point number of all the wages in the economy, right? If I had an economy where I had 10 people that were all earning $100,000 a year, and I had 100 people who were all earning $30,000 a year, right? If I were to just kill 50 of these people, I've boosted my median earnings so much. Or if I fire 50 people, right? Because if we fire 50 people, then well, technically if median is the middle point here, actually we wouldn't have changed our median earnings, but you get the point. It's not going to be as bifurcated as this. But if you remove a lot of people from the economy or add a lot of people to the economy that aren't making that much money, then you're dramatically shifting your median wages without actually doing a good thing or a bad thing necessarily. You're just doing a thing. So Econoboy called this composition effects. Okay, maybe. That might be the technical term for it, composition effect. So like here during the height of COVID, who's still working? Service workers aren't working. All of them got fired or they got laid off or they got whatever because they were fucked. But work from home people, software developers, white collar workers, whatever, people that could do work from home jobs, they were still working. Their jobs pay better, right? As jobs started to get added back into the economy, we started to rehire service workers, we started to rehire construction workers, all these people. These people don't make as much money as these people. So we saw the median earnings drop, but this was good. It's not good because the median earnings dropped. It was good because the economy was adding back more jobs. They just happen to be lower paying jobs, right? So it's hard to capture all of this as a snapshot. People look at the consumer pricing index, so how much would it cost to pay for a certain basket of goods? Although some people do, what is a CPI minus housing? Some people do like CPI without housing costs. Or is CPI the one that doesn't include housing costs? Or there's another index that's like CPI, I think minus housing. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to measure this. It's very, very, very complicated. Is it core CPI? Isn't deficit spending necessarily inflationary? When the U.S. government spends more than it has collected, isn't it injecting into the economy money that wasn't already there? Yeah, but if the economy is creating more goods and services to buy, remember, inflation means, in a very, very, very simple sense, in a very reductive and pointless sense, you can say that inflation means you've got more money chasing fewer supplies, but it could also mean the same amount of money chasing, or I'm sorry, you could say that inflation is more money chasing the same supply. But you could also say inflation is the same amount of money chasing less supply, right? Inflation there's two halves to this equation. So if the government were to find a way to inject money into the economy that dramatically increased the amount of goods and services produced, that could be deflationary, even though the government is injecting money into the economy, right? It's not as simple as just saying government spending equals inflation, or even saying inflation equals bad. Macroecon is gay. I can say that. It's just, there's a lot going on here. Yeah.
Things. Let me finish. You respond with, but they actually got a lot of shit done. They actually got to do a lot of what they wanted. Exactly. And the American people are not happy with it. So then your counter argument, which is, well, they couldn't get things done that they wanted.
Have you looked into buy now, pay later loans and how they aren't included in credit scoring formulas and national statistics? So admitting I haven't ever been personally involved in these markets, but I've watched my parents do them. My impression of like buy here, pay here, stuff like that, or like layaway they used to do, any of those things are always horrible programs that are just there to abuse poor people that have bad credit that can't qualify for loans otherwise. Those are always horrible things. Don't ever participate in any of that, but in my opinion. But maybe they've changed in 20 years, but
get done. They actually got to do a lot of what they wanted. Exactly. And the American people are not happy with it. So then your counter argument, which is, well, they couldn't get things done that they wanted done, but this time they will, is bullshit, as you're admitting. They did get it.
I think people just don't get why inflation is necessary. Why can't the money's value be static or stay within a margin of variance? Isn't infinite inflation bad? Infinite inflation is bad, but I think the idea is some inflation is good because you want to encourage a velocity of money. You want to encourage money to flow through the economy, and you want to discourage people from just sitting on it and doing nothing with it. You don't want people to think that if I just stick my money in a bank and I don't spend, if I don't do anything with it, then I'm actually going to be better off than if I do anything with it. So a little bit of inflation for you to feel like nothing is happening if your money's just sitting there is good because it encourages people to invest it or to buy stuff.
Legislatively done, and America has given it the thumbs down.
Why did we have a historically good midterm? Why did we expand our majority in the Senate during an economic downturn? Why did we make Trump a one-term president, the first since George H.W. Bush? If your leadership
because of abortion
and your policies were so
social issue, it's because of social issues. It's nothing to do with the economy, which is
economic downturn. It should have been a bloodbath.
No,
what you guys are saying is that your policies are not popular.
People knew that Trump's economy got shut down.
I don't know how Econoboy didn't know this stuff, but you were embarrassingly wrong about capital gains tax and asset secured loans. Bring me on from Stream Disagreements. 5 minutes, in and out. Embarrassingly wrong, he says. Embarrassingly wrong. All right, turn off the stream. What do you want?
All right, muted. Hey, can you hear me good?
Yep.
Okay, so the whole capital gains tax thing, people are saying, okay, it's the whole loans thing, right? And when Econoboy basically came in and said, hey, I don't get it. Why do you think people are even wanting this capital gains tax? And you said it has to do with money now is worth more than money later. You kind of know what I'm talking about? Vaguely remember what you said?
I feel like if he asked me that question, my response, I think, was people feel it feels bad that somebody can essentially realize a gain without paying taxes on realizing the gain, that they can take out a bunch of money now, basically in the form of a loan, without ever actually having to increase their tax basis in some investment. But
right, but of course, that loan has to be paid back eventually. And you are aware of this, of course. And your explanation for why this is a problem is the whole money now, money later. But that doesn't make sense because banks are very aware of money now being worth more than money later, and that is priced in to the interest rate. Completely priced into the interest rate. Wait,
hold on. Just wait. Real quick. Sanity check. What is your background?
No fancy background. What kind of background are you asking about? Education? I guess so obviously I work in a very peculiar industry, so I can't speak to norms, but my understanding is ROI on any type of business stuff is hopefully if you're taking out money, you're trying to make at least 10%. For startups, it can be significantly higher, but you're trying to make a decent amount back. Banks don't lend money at 10% though. Yeah.
So when you say it's priced in,
because if the bank doesn't lend it, then the bank can't make any money if it doesn't do anything with the money. So it's like an economic transaction. Both people benefit.
Yeah, but the bank's goal of making money isn't to try to make at an equal amount that an investor would make money, right? Their interest rates, their goals are much lower than that, right?
Because
well, one is because I think there's legislation that bans banks. I think certain banks from taking part in investment markets, right? I think that was a thing that happened after 2007, 2008, where banks weren't ordinary banks that do mortgages and shit aren't allowed to also double as investment banks anymore. But I'm just saying that if it is the case that a bank can be really happy and profitable at 2.5% or 3% for a loan, and an individual can take out loans that are asset defended essentially, right? If they can take those loans out and expect to make 10% return on their money, then they could infinitely borrow money and then pay it back with a future loan where everybody's making money.
I agree with everything you're saying, but it's just not a problem. There is a reason, there is a good faith reason why there is a problem that the capital gains tax can be said to be attempting to solve, but It has to do with here. I'll see if you can guess it. If I clue you into estate, when someone dies, what happens to their estate? That's where the loan. See if you can think. Do you want to try, or do you want me to just say it?
I think I know what you're gonna say, and I think I already know the answer to it, and I don't think you know the answer to it.
Oh yeah.
Are you going to say that the big hack is actually that when people die, they can pass off investments to their children that they've never actually realized to gain in, so the children don't have to pay the taxes on the increase in tax basis?
Yeah, that's all I was going to say.
Yeah, but the answer to that is that you actually do have to pay the step-up in basis. It's called stepped-up basis. When an estate dies, the difference between the asset tax basis and what it's sold as when it's transferred is something that you do have to pay taxes against. The reason why we don't see that for a lot of investments or inheritances is because there's a $13 million deduction, I think, on the estate tax. So if your dad dies and he gives you a $10 million investment that he bought for $1 million, you get that investment at $10 million tax basis, and you feel like, oh my God, I just cheated the capital gains tax. But not actually. What actually happened was the estate sells the security, or rather the estate pays to step up the basis in tax, but that $9 million increase in tax basis is accounted for in the estate tax exemption.
Damn, okay, you're cluing me in. I'm gonna look into that, but I'm satisfied knowing that you're already clued into that, and I'll do some more research on my own, because I'm not an economist.
I love you, buddy. Be careful.
Thank you.
The little thing that he's talking about is called, there's a name for this. I think the estate tax exemption, I think, is on $13 million. But basically, when the owner of the estate dies, you can step up the basis using that estate tax exemption, which is why some people feel like it's a hack because, oh my God, I didn't have to pay the taxes on the capital gains of my father. But you do. It's just accounted for basically in the step up in basis. It resets the cost basis of an appreciated inherited asset for tax purposes. But okay, sorry.
They knew it, and then it got shut down when they were thriving.
The pandemic.
I just quick thing. Your mic keeps peaking when you talk. It like peaks and it's kind of hard to hear you. I'm just letting you know. Pisco, you wanted to go?
Yeah, I want to answer to Rob's cavalcade of nonsense earlier, and so he started off by saying, and can we get quiet in the peanut gallery, Andrew? Like, I don't know why you feel the need every 2 seconds. I think like you're scared when I talk because you only interrupt me. I mean, this is gonna be a problem.
We were talking, dummy.
All right. So first of all, he starts with the assumption that we are not okay with speaking about the general economic policy of Harris and Biden respectively in terms of what their administration has done. We absolutely are willing to talk about it. We were specifically talking about one policy because that's what Andrew asked us. He asked us to talk about one policy, but you think that we're dodging something. We're dodging the general economic character of what's been going on. We do not shy away from the fact that over the course of the last 4 years, I haven't mentioned the word opportunity economy at all.
Well,
why do we have a $13 million deductible on inheritance? Can somebody make a good case for that for me? I feel like let me check. If it truly is just like a $13 million deduction, I don't know if you can. I feel like they should probably be lower. It seems kind of crazy. You could inherit $10 million tax-free. Your steelman argument is going to be, well, I mean, all of this money has already been paid taxes on by the estate. Like, now you're going to tax it again just because the guy died. But I feel like it should. My guess is it should just be more graduated. Like, if you want to say there should be a $13 million exemption, why not just say that that you have like a progressive taxation up to $13 million? Like, maybe it starts really low, like 2%, and then 5% at 5 million, and maybe 10% at 10 million, and then when you hit 13 million, then it goes up to the ordinary whatever the estate tax is. But the exemption is fairly high. But I don't know how much money you're actually honestly recovering in a state. Like, how much money do you make on the expiration of a person? Yeah, I don't know.
Have you heard me? We're talking about the leadership of the country. We're talking about the leadership of this country. Who's better positioned to do it? And based on the previous administration, right?
Well, I want to hear the end of Pisco's statement, and then you can talk. Also, Turk, I have you written down. Eventually, I will bring it back to you.
So he asked, why haven't we done all these things in 4 years? It's
buy, borrow, die explained. I'm a private wealth attorney at an international law firm headquartered in the U.S., and I implement buy, borrow, die for a living. The short answer is yes, buy, borrow, die works, and is a devastatingly effective tax elimination strategy. Okay, but I don't want to die, so fuck this, but let's see. Okay, so you purchase an asset. He has a tax basis in the asset. Peter sells the asset. It's a realization event, and he'll be subject to income tax. The asset is a capital asset. Oh, actually, I just thought of a huge counter. I bet I know where this guy's going. Oh, and if that guy that came in actually knew anything about finance, I think I can think of actually a big counter. You shouldn't be able to pay for a step up in basis as part of the estate tax exemption, because that should just be a capital gains appreciation tax. Why are you allowed to use the estate tax exemption to step up the basis? What you should do is the estate should step the basis up, and then the estate should pay the capital gains tax, and then your estate taxes should kick in. That would probably be the better argument against that. I don't know why you're allowed to apply your estate tax exemption to step the basis up of any capital asset. That seems, I don't know what the good argument is for that. Maybe there is a good argument for it, but I don't know. But I bet that's what this guy's going to talk about. Because let's say that I have a $10 million investment. I got $10 million of tax basis and a $20 million investment. Let's say that I sell that the day before I die, and I pay capital gains tax on $10 million or whatever. And then I die, and then I leave it to my children. They just inherit that money, but less all the money that I just paid in taxes. But let's say that I don't sell that asset and I die, and I pass it on to my kids. They can use the estate tax exemption to step the basis up of that investment, and now they don't have to pay the capital gains tax. I don't know why that would be the case, but I don't know. But also, I don't know how much money you'd even be making in taxes here by getting rid of this loophole, because this loophole is only going to help you up to $13 million of stepped up basis. It's not going to help like a billionaire, I don't think. But let's see. Let's read what this guy says. I could be totally wrong, but if Peter sells the asset, it's a realization event. He'll be subject to income tax. The asset is a capital asset. Distributed on the asset for 1 year. He'll receive long-term capital gains treatment and pay income tax at preferential rates if he sold it. Nevertheless, Peter's long-term cap gain rate would be 20%. He'd be subject to the net investment income tax at 20%. If Peter lives in Quahog, okay, don't care. So if Peter were to sell the asset and cash in his gain, he'd have a total tax liability for around $17 million, and his after-tax proceeds would be $91 million. Peter's buddy Joe overheard some of his cop buddies talking about how the ultra-wealthy never pay tax because they implement buy, borrow, die, and he shares the idea with Peter. Peter decides to look into it. Peter goes to the big city and hires a private wealth attorney who connects him with an investment banker at Quahog Sachs. The investment banker might give Peter a loan or line of credit of up to $97 million. Oh, borrow. I didn't even read this. Buy, borrow, die. Borrowing, if you borrow 10 million. To make an investment and have the investment appreciate? No. Hold on. Let's see. No, oh no, the borrow is just like living off of loans. That's what I'm thinking. Never mind. Hold on. Oh, Quahog. My bad. Quahog? Is that how do you pronounce it? Needs to pay no taxes. Okay, might give loan or line of credit. Okay, die. Peter's been living off the asset-backed loans / lines of credit, and his asset has continued to appreciate in value. Let's say 35 years have passed with an annual rate of return of 8%. The asset now has a fair market value of $740 million. When Peter dies, the base of the asset is adjusted to the asset's fair market value on Peter's date of death. In other words, Peter's base is $50 million. The asset is just $740 million. You can now sell the asset tax-free because gain is computed by subtracting adjusted basis from the sales proceeds. Can use the cash to pay back the loans. Line of credit. He's paid no income. Oh. I don't think this is correct. I'm either mistaken here or this guy's lying about his background, but his name is Taxonomics, and he's a mod here, so I don't think so. I don't think he'd be lying, right? There's something that's happening here that I don't understand. When Peter dies, I don't think you can step the basis up of your investment when you die for free. I think that step up in basis has to come from somewhere. You can't just be stepped up without. Ordinarily, your estate tax step up in basis comes from the estate tax exemption, I believe. Let me check. Let me keep reading. Or wait, somebody said keep reading here. Wait, hold on. Actual, if that weren't the case, the ultra wealthy wouldn't have to pay private wealth attorneys like me upwards of $2,500 an hour for their $2,500 an hour. I don't believe that, but okay. For their tax, asset protection, estate film. This type of lending is generally not economically feasible. Taxpayers a net worth exceeding around $300 million. If you're worth less than that, you're not going to be able to command attractive loan / line of credit terms from investment banks. You're going to have to get a plain vanilla product from a retail lender, which is going to have a relatively high interest rate. What is the, doesn't Vanguard or Wells Fargo do these loans at $1 million? Or are they saying that at $300 million, you get like extra special types of loans. Hold on. Jesus Christ. No, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for secured loans. I started to bring up stuff from 40 minutes ago. With respect to inflation, you generally need both expansion of the money supply coupled with an economic event that causes a good/supply or good/service supply squeeze. Sure. I thought I saw a secured loan load. Oh, I'm sorry. What do I have load here? I know. The unified estate and gift tax exemption for 20... Oh, okay. This is a very unusual oversight because buy, borrow, die, as it exists in the real world at least, is very much an integrated tax and estate planning strategy. The unified estate and gift tax exemption for 2024 is $13.61 million per taxpayer, $27.22 million per married couple. That means you can give up to $13.6 million without paying. The above example, Peter dies with an asset worth $740 million, assuming he has no other assets or liabilities. He's going to be subject to an estate tax of $290.5 million. Peter's avoided income tax by virtue of the basis adjustment that occurs at death, but he's subject to a substantial estate tax that in theory serves as a backstop to make sure he pays some taxes. The conventional wisdom is that you can avoid income tax or you can avoid estate tax, but you can't do both. The conventional wisdom is wrong. I'll explain why. Hold on. I'm sorry. I got to see this. When you die, does your tax basis step up to asset value? When an asset is inherited rather than sold or gifted, the cost basis typically gets stepped up to their fair market value of the property at the date of the individual's death. But you have to pay, don't you have to pay for that step up? According to Section 1014 of the Internal Revenue Code, if a person holds property at death, it will receive a new basis equal to the fair market value of the property at the person's date of death. In the case of appreciated assets, the rule allows people to inherit the assets such as stocks or real estate without inheriting the tax burden that's triggered by capital gains. It is known as a step-up in basis. It's in states that recognize community property laws. Married couples stand to benefit greatly. The IRS also grants the inheritor a long-term, how does it base? Okay. All assets have a cost basis, which is more or less its purchase price. When an asset is sold, the difference between the cost basis and the sale price is a capital gain. Capital gains are subject to taxes. When an asset is inherited rather than sold or gifted, the cost basis typically gets stepped up to the fair market value of the property at the date of the individual's death. From a tax standpoint, it's as if the asset was purchased at the price, okay, and no taxes owed on any of the previous, okay. This is true for the person that inherits it. I'm almost positive that the estate has to pay for that step up in basis. Did I just misread this somewhere, or is this just not true? Typically, the cost basis of an asset equals the purchase price of the asset minus any adjustments. When inherited asset policy for inheritors can adjust the cost basis of the current firm of capital gains is accrued. It's recognized but not realized for the beneficiary. Okay, in other words, it's included in the value of the asset but not taxable, so on appreciation. Hence, the executor of the estate is. Consider a hypothetical inheritor named Angela who purchased a home in 1975 for $50K over the 48 years, an increase in $500K. In a will, she'll find Many inherited the home, and the cost basis was adjusted to the fair market value. It was $20,000. That's 7 minutes. How much can I step up basis capital asset on death? Wouldn't this be something that varies from state to state? I thought the estate tax is a federal tax. The estate does have to pay for taxes above the exemption. Yeah, I'm thinking that a lot of this this advice is just working for the average person because the average person just never hits the actual estate tax exemption. So it feels like it's a free step up, but it's not free. The $13.61 million estate tax exemption excludes the vast majority of estates from having to pay an estate tax, but it doesn't eliminate them. If you're the executor of an estate with a gross value above $13.64 million for adding adjustable taxable gifts, subtracting the amount greater than the exemption, the excess taxable gifts. Okay, hold on. Okay, I think this is what's happening. That other side is just not mentioning it, though. I'm like 79% sure that I'm correct here. Okay. So I'm like 79% sure that this guy is not correct here. But then he's claiming that he has a job that he either doesn't have, he's lying, or I'm missing something really big that I'm just not, I don't know or I'm not understanding. What a well-advised taxpayer would do is implement an estate freezing technique early on in the buy, borrow, die game. Is tax evasion worth it? No. Tax avoidance means optimizing your tax footprint. Tax evasion implies breaking the law. Or no, it means breaking the law. It's tax evasion. I wonder if anybody in the comments corrects him on this or what they say. 18 days ago. People like me explain the loopholes to the government all the time, usually when the legislation is proposed. Taxonomics. So we're really going to throw the assets into a family limited partnership or family limited liability company. One benefit of doing that is we're going to be able to take valuation discounts when we make our gifts. Discount amounts can range depending on how aggressive the appraiser is and what discounts are available. Variably in the step plan, you'll see the discounts conglomerate around 35%. He's using a lot of abbreviations. I feel like he knows what he's talking about. Huh. That's Mr. IRS. He runs the IRS. Oh, shit. Exactly. Which part do you disagree with them on? I don't believe that this part is correct. He's got a magical part in here that makes the strategy work, and it's this. When you die, your asset's tax basis is stepped up to where the fair market value of the asset is the day that you die. However, he's saying that that step up in basis comes at no cost. I think that the step up in basis has to be paid for. So he would pay a capital gains appreciation on the difference between $740 million and $50 million. He bought the asset for $50 million, and it now has a fair market value of $740 million. To step that tax basis up, he would have to pay $690 million capital gains tax. Now, but it would actually be $690 million less $13.6 million, which is the estate tax exemption, which covers the vast majority of estates, which is why most people think that this can happen for free, but it doesn't happen when you exceed the threshold of the estate tax exemption, is my understanding. But the basis must be consistent with the estate tax return for person in general. The basis of any property for which the subsection A applies shall not exceed, in the case of property, the final value which has been determined for the tax imposed by Chapter 11. Subsection determination. Yeah, I don't know. Okay. Looks like he explains how to get around that in the second part of the post. I didn't see that. I feel like I read it, but... Oh, hold on. Wait, forget everything I just said. Hold on. Wait. Oh, wait a second. Hold on. Wait, there's a whole second part. Peter buys an asset worth $50 million and transfers it to the PLG 2024 Irrevocable Trust, or Irrevocable Trust, the trust, to eliminate gift tax on the transfer. He uses $13.61 million exemption amount and a variety of sophisticated techniques. We don't really get into here. That might involve preferred freeze partners. After 10 years of appreciating at an annual rate of 8%, of the asset is worth $108 million. Borrow. Peter goes to the bank to get a loan, but now Peter doesn't have the asset to use as collateral because he transferred it to the trust. Not a problem. The trustee of the trust is going to guarantee the loan using the trust asset and as collateral. In return, Peter will pay the trust a guarantee fee, typically around 1%. Peter can transact the trust prior to Peter's death. He is going to use a loan/line of credit to obtain cash. Then he's going to exercise his power of substitution to swap the highly appreciated asset out of the trust and swap the cash into the trust. So immediately before the loan, Peter might have 0 assets, 0 liabilities. The trust will have an asset worth $780 million and no liabilities. Immediately after the loan, Peter will have perhaps $700 million cash, 90% loan to value, collateralized by the trust asset, and $700 million in liabilities. The trust will still have some. The people will exercise power of substitution. Then Peter dies. Peter's gross estate includes a $700 million asset. His estate receives an indebtedness deduction for the $700 million. Oh, okay. I don't know about this. I don't know enough about structures of trust or anything, so I couldn't comment on any of this at all. This might possibly be true, but I couldn't say. If it is, it's probably not good though. But I also don't understand it, so okay. Back to this.
Absolutely sound answer that IRI gave, that first of all, we were cleaning up a mess. We were in the middle of a COVID pandemic and it was a crisis. The first thing that the Biden administration did was pass a recovery act. You could say,
can you explain why it is a good thing for someone to step the basis up to the fair market value after death? Because you don't want a new inheritor to be like subject to a whole bunch of tax liability. That feels really shitty. Imagine I die and I leave Nathan $1 million and I bought it for $1,000, $1 million asset, and I bought it for $1,000. Well, when Nathan inherits that, well, there's one of two things that has to happen. Either one, he has to immediately pay taxes on $999,000 of appreciation because that capital gain appreciation didn't happen, or he would inherit $1 million asset with a $1,000 tax basis, which is weird because now he's carrying a whole bunch of capital gains overhead that he doesn't have any, like, it's just a lot to keep track of, maybe? I don't know, actually, why you don't inherit the lower basis. Maybe it's just complicated paperwork. It'd be weird. A bunch of people would be carrying around assets with, like, a tax basis from 200 years ago. Maybe it would just be a way to, it's just way too much lock-in, I guess. Maybe it's a lock-in effect too, right? Do you really want somebody to inherit something that if they were to sell it, they'd immediately lose 30% of it to pay capital gains? Like, it would probably do bad things to the supply of investments and money and capital and everything. That'd be my guess. I don't know. Pet honey.
say it's inflationary, but you look at economic analysis after the fact, they don't attribute it, the inflationary effect of that policy or other policies to those specific pieces of legislation. In fact, it's a global inflation crisis that is facing the entire world. And as IRI or Hutch, I think, pointed out, America, relatively speaking, has recovered better than the other G7 countries, better than the other advanced economies. We got a shit ton of legislation passed that specifically relates to the economy, whether that's the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Act, which will absolutely benefit the economy in the future, and other pieces of legislation. I'm willing to fight and defend this administration for what it stood for and what it got done. You point to the fact that there are bad polls. Trump had bad polls in his term. If we just look to polls to determine, or the general trend of the economy, and this kind of correlation equals causation analysis, I mean, that would be a great way to defend like the policies of George Bush right before the Great Recession, right? You have to look more than just how the economy generally is doing or what people think about it generally.
Real purpose, so rich kids can inherit more. I feel like inheriting something at a lower basis would probably be more beneficial for a rich person than for a poor person. So if anything, it probably helps. My guess is it would help poor people more, is to inherit it at the actual basis rather than to have to carry forward some weird wonky. But I mean, anything can be used or abused. You have more options when you're wealthy you have more options when you're wealthy. But I don't know if I would say that necessarily favors the rich.
And look to the policies themselves and what the likely effects of them.
Yeah, I think I have to say.
And as to the lying point about,
is there any more time we can give you, Pisco?
The last point I'll make.
Wanted to respond.
No thinking person thinks that Kamala Harris was in charge of the administration for the past 3 or 4 years. That's pure fantasy. If you read any of the reports of the insiders of who's operating things behind the scenes or whether Joe Biden was in charge of the first 4 years, no one is saying that Kamala Harris is running the show.
If I may, real quick, just to respond to that point.
Do you care if they take from you? You were next. It was your
I mean, Rob, if it's quick, I want to get in here, Rob. But
Harris herself has said of many of these issues, she was the last person in the room. And my statement is, Harris.
What do you want?
Hey, you talk to your best friend like that. It's fucking rude. Okay, quick question for you.
Yeah.
On I'm like 30 minutes behind or 20 minutes behind you covering this segment. Rob went on a tirade about, and I think you were dealing with this in a Twitter space, is something like, well, she's the vice president now, so why should we trust any promise that she makes? Because she's in office now, she could do it now. I'm curious what you make of how effective you think this would be, just flipping that around on them. You know, she's the vice president. She doesn't have any like real power. Donald Trump was president. Why didn't he do all his shit?
I ask that all the time. Yeah, we already had Donald Trump for 4 years. That's why I thought it was so funny that he still ran on Make America Great or Make America Great Again. Like, you were just president, bro. What do you mean Make America Great Again? You didn't get anything done in your 4 years. But they already have a cope. They have like a prepackaged cope. Remember, there's a prepackaged cope for everything. But their prepackaged answer was, well, when Trump was president the first time, he didn't know how bad the deep state was, and everybody was against him. That's why he didn't get anything done. But this time around, he'll be able to get things done because he knows that he's working against the deep state. Yeah, gotcha. That's usually there. Yeah.
Oh, I thought they had something more creative than that, because to me, like I watched this Dylan Burns panel yesterday, and the chain smoker guy, that dude is fucking unhinged.
The
like,
top left dude.
Yeah,
he shouldn't really be at any. It's kind of a waste of time, but yeah.
Yeah, he's just an absolute dick. But I've been hearing this thought terminating sentence all the time. Well, she's the vice president right now. If she's she's in power, she can make all this happen. She can reduce healthcare costs. She can reduce childcare costs. She can do all of it. And it's just like, well, let's just grant the premise that she has the power to do it now, but we could just easily, effortlessly flip that around on you. Donald Trump wasn't anybody's vice president. He was the president. He actually had full control of not just Congress for 2 years, but also a sympathetic Supreme Court. So you could easily make the case that Trump at his peak during his presidency had more of government, at least under his nominal control, than President Biden ever did. And yet he failed to repeal and replace Obamacare. He failed to build a wall. He failed to cap insulin at $35. He failed to do
infrastructure.
Right. Fail. So I just didn't know if you think that there was any utility in just like parking there and saying, okay, if that's the standard, then I need you to explain to me persuasively why your fucking cult leader failed so spectacularly. Like, even if you want to shit all over Kamala, by definition, objectively, your guy is still worse and less competent. Or they just hit you with the that cope you just said.
Yeah, it's. I mean, truly, you're just kind of looking for like the checkmate, whatever moves, because like none of this is done in good faith, right? Like no part of any of these arguments for Trump is done in good faith.
So
like how many times have you heard like the no wars talking point? Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, no, I mean,
like Syria. I thought, like, remember, there were no wars under Trump, but he also eliminated ISIS. Like, what? There were no wars under Trump, but he bombed Syria's airport. There were no wars under Trump, but he still did all the drone strikes in Yemen. There were no what is it? Like, none of.
Well, I'm curious. So you're more of a foreign policy wonk than I am, but was the Afghanistan the only declared war that we were in? Like, what other declared wars are we in?
The thing is, I don't even know what it means for like a question. Did we even formally declare war on Afghanistan, or was that just did we do that under the authorization for use of military force that we still had left over from Iraq?
You know what? You're right.
I don't even know if there was like a formal war on Afghanistan declared. I don't know when was the last time.
No, you're right, because Congress would have to do it, and I don't remember a formal declaration.
Yeah, I don't think I could be wrong, but I think the authorization for using military force, didn't that come from the Gulf War in '91?
Yeah, I think that was the
so
genesis.
We didn't even really have a declared war under Bush, right?
Well, yeah.
So it's like,
right.
Yeah,
because it was the war on terror. You don't declare war on terror.
Yeah.
What was
and we just don't like declare war anymore. That's not really how things go, especially because we're dealing with so many non-state actors now, right? The Taliban kind of is a non-state actor. You know, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. These are all non-state actors. And the biggest like military conflict probably in the past 20 years, excluding Ukraine and Russia, was probably the Syrian civil war. And there were no like formal wars declared there. So
Google Food tells me that the last formal declaration of war was World War II. So yeah. All right. So okay.
Maybe, yeah,
well then,
sure.
No, I mean that's what Senate.gov is saying according to my Google Food. But okay. Well then, take formal wars out of the equation.
Let's take formal wars out and let's look at big military strikes.
Right.
And I might be brain farting here, but have there been any under Biden? Because I know under Trump you had.
Would you count the Houthi thing? Would you count that as a?
you maybe could count the Houthi
ships?
thing. Was that just
Yeah.
the U.S. or was that done with like UN approval?
I don't know if it's done with UN approval.
I don't remember if that was like NATO, UN, or just the U.S. That might have just been the U.S. I know that the English, I think, had like a carrier or some boat there.
Yeah.
But okay, so you've got the Yemen strike. Okay, under Trump, you had the Syrian airport was bombed. That was a big strike.
He vaporized Soleimani.
Yes, yes, that's true. He did an assassination of Soleimani. By the way, I don't even disagree with either of those actions, but.
Not necessarily. There's some sound. I mean,
but I don't think. But it's just. But if that's what we're gonna say, right? Like the idea that like Trump was involved in less war. Like, what the fuck does that even mean?
Right. The reason I'm asking is, okay, since we know now that Afghanistan was not a formal war, but that's one less major conflict that the United States is directly involved with under Biden, right? I mean, like she said something the other day, and it was apparently fact checked. Like the vice president said something like, "We have no troops deployed in active combat zones," or something to that effect. And apparently, it's like, yeah, but no. Like apparently, we have U.S. troops
in Syria
that are in places where active combat may occur, but it's not been designated by the Department of Defense as like an active combat zone or an active war. So I think they're kind of like, playing fast and loose with the definitions there. But
all of it is like fast and loose and like dumb and retarded and like, yeah. Because I mean, there were three soldiers that died? I don't know if they were in southern Syria or if they were in northern Jordan, but remember there was the drone strike that killed a couple military people. So yeah, it's all of these, the problem is like all of these terms are so amorphous and like political that it doesn't really mean anything. Like I didn't know if Trump was going to fight on this. Like, no, I don't even know. Harris might know. I'm not sure. I know Hillary was very smart. I know Trump is a fucking retard. I really don't know how intelligent Harris is, but it was funny to me that Harris tried to take credit for Biden exiting Afghanistan. Technically, though, what? She should?
I think she should.
She could, but that was on Trump's timetable that he negotiated. Right. But I don't think Trump wants to take credit for it because it'll sound like it was his fault that the 13 people died. But I don't think that Trump knows. I wish Harris would have asked him this. I feel I wish Harris campaign needs to reach out to me and I'll give you like one or two killer questions, okay? And I'll pay your campaign all my money if I'm wrong, okay? I think there are some key questions you could ask Trump that he doesn't know. I think Donald Trump thinks that the Taliban killed those 13 American soldiers.
Yeah, instead of ISIS-K.
Yeah, and that's why he makes it such a huge deal. I think he knows that. I'm sorry, I think he doesn't know that. And it would be very funny to hear him that up on stage. But yeah, it's the whole like thing of like, what are we involved in wars or whatever the fuck is like retarded. I think it's stupid.
But based on what you know, because again, you track both the Russia-Ukraine situation and the Gaza situation. As far as I know, like we don't have boots on the ground there, right? Like there's no in Ukraine or Gaza, right?
So
like, we're not.
Even this is a question that requires some amount of good faith. Who was I talking to recently about this? When somebody says boots on the ground, the good faith, obvious interpretation of that is like a fighting force of soldiers. Right. Now, in Ukraine and maybe in Israel, we might have like special ops there that help with training missions or training local police or something like that. We might have those people there. And there will be people. I think the one Russian paid Jackson Hinkle, he, I think, tried to use that in an argument against me, and maybe even Fuentes did, where they're like, oh no, we actually do have troops in Ukraine. It's like, not really, not how you would mean troops or boots on the ground. That's not true. But so I think we do have soldiers there, but they're not like active fighting forces. They're there for like training and stuff. Yeah.
Right. So it's fair to say that we are not involved in the hot war against Russia or Hamas.
No, not only that, we're involved. My guess would be, and somebody with more broad foreign policy experience can check me here, we're probably involved in less military conflict today directly. I would think a lot less than we were.
Yeah, that was my question, because to me, when I hear them say that, there were no wars under Trump or we were less involved with war under Trump, I'm like, but are we though? Because the only de facto war that we were really involved with was, my understanding, was Afghanistan, and that actually, we ended that on Biden's watch, not Trump.
A few. So I think Biden, was the one that officially pulled us out of and pulled the plug on the Saudi coalition in Yemen. I believe Biden ended that involvement completely. Like somebody can look this up, or please check if somebody. I don't think we are involved in drone strikes or anything in Yemen anymore. I believe that's the case. Number one. And then number 2, we completely exited Afghanistan. And number 3, I don't think we're involved in any more combat operations at all, active combat operations in Syria, which we were under Trump. I don't know if those were still happening at the end of Trump's admin or not, though. But yeah.
Well, yeah. So then it sounds like it's a full-on fucking lie.
It is, because people just look at the big hot wars right now, all of which Trump contributed to, which is also very frustrating, again, because people are very one-dimensional. So, for instance, one of the big inciting moments for the Great March of Return, the border riots, was the fact that the U.S. The U.S. Agreed to acknowledge the embassy moving to Jerusalem. That was like one of
Tel Aviv.
Yeah, that was a big inciting. From Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, yeah. That was a big inciting moment for the Palestinians. And then the Abraham Accords also stoked those flames a lot too, because the Palestinians continued to feel like, oh, fuck, we're getting left behind and ignored. Like, we got to do some shit. Shit is fucked. These are things that were happening under Kushner, under the Trump administration, that pushed towards October 7th, but he'll never get credit for that because it's not, the linkage is too complicated. And there's I always want to say cigar report. It's the something, it's not an officer.
Special Inspector General, you're talking about Afghanistan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That pullout deal was insane. I don't think I read that report fully. I think I skimmed it. I hope I skimmed it. Otherwise, Pisco's going to be in here screaming 2 months later saying I lied about skimming it. But I'm pretty sure that report lays the blame for how catastrophic that withdrawal it was. I think almost completely at the foot of the Trump administration. And I think part of the reason why was because I bring this up a lot, that the Afghanistan government wasn't involved in those negotiations. My understanding is that when the pullout started to happen, as the Taliban were starting to make their way through Afghanistan-controlled territory, they were literally showing up and saying like, oh, you guys shouldn't even be fighting here because this area has already been promised to us. That there were some Afghanistan soldiers that were like, we had no idea this. And then the will to fight and everything just evaporated instantaneously. And Trump had already drawn down troops to historically low levels when the Biden admin came in. I don't know if it was you or somebody else who brought this up. Remember also, Trump wanted to pull everybody out of Afghanistan, even more than he already did before he left, and they said no to that. So yeah, like Biden was in a pretty fucked position at that point, and the Afghanistan government was also in a fucked position at that point. So all of these things, it sucks because this is the strategy, and it worked really well for Trump. He played it well to kick the can down the road, just like he did with some of his expiring tax cuts. And I hope it doesn't set the pace for, I'm never going to do anything permanent. I'm just going to do something, and I'm going to make it expire on the next term. And if I'm still president, I'll extend it so I get credit for it again. But if I'm not president, and it lapses under my the next person's administration, they can get blamed for something that they didn't technically even do, right? Like right now, is Kamala going to raise taxes? Or are they just going to expire? Or is it just going to be the Trump tax cuts expiring, right? Do you see how bullshit that is?
No, 100%, especially based on how you spin it. The cigar report on Afghanistan, yeah. So it was fair in the sense that, it said in hindsight, you could make the case that, again, like President Biden closing down Bagram Air Base may, in hindsight, have been a mistake. But they talk about like how that was it was a sound decision, even if in hindsight it was a wrong decision, because we didn't have the troops there to maintain that base. And it was, like 30 minutes or 60 minutes away from a major population center. Mm-hmm. So they would have had to move all the people they were trying to evacuate miles and miles and miles away to a base that they didn't have the troops to defend adequately in the first place. So like even like that's a sound military decision. I mean, I'm not a military expert, but it's like, okay, if the choice is between fortification versus logistical convenience, and we'd have to surge troops in the first place, so you'd effectively be reinvading Afghanistan or at least violating the terms of the deal. Like the cigar report goes into detail, and it's like, hey, listen, you can make the case that Biden didn't handle this perfectly. You can also make the case that the State Department under Biden waited too long to declare, I think it's called a NEO, and I can't remember exactly what the acronym is, but it's like an emergency order. But again, even that, all of those decisions were based on sound logic. The State Department waited until the last possible minute to declare an emergency because they didn't want to undermine the Afghan government's legitimacy and basically say, hey, we're getting the fuck out of here. They were trying to hold out as long as possible. The single biggest reason, according to that report, that Afghanistan collapsed is precisely what you said, was the Doha Agreement. And I sent you a PDF file. It dropped a couple of days before, a day or two before that debate. So it was like Sunday or Monday. The House Republican Foreign Affairs Committee did a whole hearing, or they concluded, like a year's worth of investigations on the Afghanistan withdrawal. And they timed it to drop a day before the debate. And this is the Democrats' like rebuttal to their report. Mm-hmm. And
Just as a quick thing, it's embarrassing to say this. I truly hope that it changes. I have considered more over the past 2 months leaving this country more than I ever have in my entire life, which is very sad. If I hear something that starts with the term House Republicans, I'm thinking like Finkelstein. Like, there is so much garbage that passes through the House Republican stuff. It's unreal. It's unbelievable.
Did you know?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, did you know that they because they're in the majority, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they technically have the power in the House. They can't get must-pass bills past their own fucking coalition. They're constantly fighting amongst themselves. But one thing they did make the time for is they wanted to rename Dulles Airport after Trump, and they wanted to rename the Gulf of Mexico or nearshore waters near the Gulf of Mexico, like the Trump free zone ocean area or what. It's such cringe cultish bullshit that they make the time for. It's pretty pathetic, but the good news is I think we're favored to take back the House. But what's
also
interesting
that, by the way, how's that impeachment going, right? The one that Jim Jordan did, and they got the report out.
So that's so fucking funny because they dropped this report. They're like, yes, President Biden committed impeachable offenses, but we're not going to recommend an impeachment vote because
do you understand?
They don't have the fucking numbers.
Lack of this is what I say again: lack of accountability, lack of responsibility. And people don't understand this. Okay, they're acting like a belligerent minority in the House,
right?
And they're a majority,
right?
That's insane. It's unbelievable. How do you lose your speaker seat? It's unbelievable. Do you have any idea how dysfunctional you have to be? Also, this, right? And this is even broader than this, right? Over the ACA stuff, okay? Vote. I don't want to say voting is done for show, but you don't call votes without knowing who's going to vote for what.
That
right?
was Nancy Pelosi's rule. She says you never, ever, ever bring a vote to the floor unless you would bet
obviously.
your life.
And this is this is the government, right? Nobody's going to do this. You're not going to be like, okay, well, let's vote on this and see if this major legislation passes, right? McCain voting no on that ACA thing. What the fuck are you doing, Republican? Yeah, it's unreal to me that how incompetent they are, even when they are the majority party. And people they want to trust these guys to run the country? Are you fucking you can't even run the fucking House. Remember, first example, history of the entire United States ever, of a majority party losing their speaker seat.
Yeah, so that it took 10 times to get McCarthy that position in the first place, exclusively because of his own party. He had Matt Gaetz and members of the Freedom Caucus cock-blocking him, and he couldn't get the votes. Remember, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. I think it took 10 to 13 times to finally get him the seat. Mm-hmm. Then, to your point, he loses it 8 weeks later or 8 months later. And by the way, do you remember, just reliving memory lane here, the cope that we got from centrists? I think it might have even been Sitch and Adam, that they were upset that Democrats.
The Democrats wouldn't come and support and save.
Yeah,
bro.
Right.
There was a debate that I had a few days ago. Who was I debating? And I think I was trying to ask, give me one example, because it's always supposed to be, well, the Democrats need to compromise and make things right. The Democrats need to compromise. And I was like, can you give me one example of the Republicans having to compromise? When have we ever said the Republicans need to compromise us ever? And I think, who was I debating, guys? Does anybody remember this? The only example that he could give when the Republicans had to compromise with themselves in order to get something done. And I'm like, bro, what the fuck? You guys are so crazy. You're the only example that you can give me was Republicans compromising with themselves on something in order to.
It was the filibuster. It was Wick. I remember that.
Oh, yeah. Was it? Yeah, it was Wick with the filibuster. Yeah, that was the only example he gave. Yeah, for the filibuster. Yeah. Oh my God. Sorry. Yeah, Trump wanted to break the filibuster, and McConnell said no. And even that, just not to pick on Wick here, but just even that idea. So McConnell's primary objectives were to stack the federal judiciary, stack the courts, and tax cuts. He didn't need to break the filibuster there because all they needed was a simple majority. And this is how you know McConnell would absolutely break the filibuster if his priorities were on the line, because they changed Senate rules to make those three things happen. Yeah. So there's a rule in the Senate Judiciary. It was called the blue slip, and it's existed for decades. It's not in the Constitution. It's one of those norms that's existed for both parties. So if Senator Bennell of Florida disagrees with President Jesiah's judicial nominee for his state, you can give a blue slip. Senator Bennell could say, hey, listen, Mr. President, I don't like this candidate. Find a different one. I'm giving my blue slip.
And it was basically like a soft veto, and both parties respected it for years. Trump wins the presidency, Republicans win the Senate. The first thing they do is kill the blue slip rule, which means that no Democrat could block one of Trump's nominees in their state. Then, when Biden wins the presidency, the Democrats keep that rule, and this is for circuit judges, not district judges. And Republicans are bitching that the Democrats didn't restore the blue slip rule. They're like, wait a minute, I don't, I think it was Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee. She's like, I don't like Biden's nominee for Tennessee. He's too liberal. And the Democrats, for the first time ever, were like, well, tough. You were the ones who got rid of this goddamn rule. We begged you not to do it. And now you want us to put it back because it's inconvenient to you. Fuck you. But the point is, they changed the rule to accommodate McConnell's wishes. Right. So what I'm saying is, you just know that it wasn't a principled stance McConnell had about the filibuster. If the filibuster would have gotten in the way of, here's another example. The Supreme Court. So the filibuster, he did a carve out. Mm-hmm. He nuked the filibuster for Supreme Court appointments. So my point is, like, that example was so shitty because McConnell has proven for his priorities, he is absolutely willing to kill the filibuster. And for some of the other priorities, the filibuster doesn't matter. Like, the filibuster wouldn't have helped Trump repeal the ACA because all he needed was a simple majority. That's why McCain was able to kill it, to your point. So I don't know. Like, it's not even a good example. It would be a bad example even if it were valid, because it's, to your point, Republicans fighting amongst themselves. But yeah, just a total asymmetry of expectation. And the Republicans, it's almost like they get away with not having to be a governing party. So, like, if they're in the minority, they don't have to help the majority govern. If they're in the majority, they don't have to help the minority govern. Democrats have been more responsible for legislation passing the House since Republicans took the majority. Like, if not for Democrats passing like these continuing resolutions, the government wouldn't be funded because there are enough Republicans voting against it. Like, that is how dysfunctional they are. And it's so frustrating because, to your point, they get rewarded for it. Like, they make the mess. Democrats either don't clean it up perfectly or quickly enough, mm-hmm. or whatever. And then they point to Democrats and say, they failed to clean up our mess. You should put us in a position to make a mess again. I can't square it. It's insane.
Yeah, I don't know if it has to be like a civics lesson or what, but it's very frustrating. Yeah, the accountability thing is a big thing I'm focused on now with media people and with government. It's just unreal. But the problem is the correction needs to be brutal. It can't be baby steps. I said, like, just with the last media coverage, somebody actually posted a cute little graph. I don't know if this is my subreddit or somewhere else, but it was like, does this seem biased? And it was like a bar. It was just like a little bar chart. And one was like number of corrections for Trump and number of corrections for Kamala. And then they were like, well, does this seem biased? And then there was a second graph, and it was number of corrections for Trump next to number of incorrect things Trump said, and then number of corrections for Kamala next to incorrect things Kamala said. I was like, oh, well, okay, well, this would make more sense. Yeah. The Republicans are just like they're in fantasy land right now. Like, they're not real human beings to like negotiate with. They're just crazy obstructionists that under McConnell, for as much as I think he tried to obstruct the Obama's presidency and played, party politics and all that, I think I think McConnell has a conservative vision for America that he wants at all costs. But now the problem is the tools that he's used to ramrod, these crazy conservative ideas are now being used for anti-American ideas, which is scary because the Republican constituency flipped on that very quickly, where they're like, oh, okay, well, we can do these anti-democratic things to get like Republican stuff passed, right? Well, we can do anti-democratic things to get the Republic destroyed. It's like, okay, well, yeah, it's very fucking annoying.
Well, and what's funny is McConnell, I don't know if I said this to you, but I said this to somebody, is like McConnell's almost like, Victor Frankenstein in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. He's like a victim of his own creation because, again, I want to make it clear, I don't think McConnell is a principled actor at all. I think, like, even when it comes to preserving the filibuster, it's purely because in order for him to do what he needed to do, he didn't need to break the filibuster. And when he did need to break the filibuster, like with passing Supreme Court nominees and stuff, he did, right? So it just, anyone who thinks that he is a principled actor is a fucking idiot. But to your point, he also is not reckless, right? So he won't break a thing unless he really needs to break a thing to secure a political victory. Mm-hmm. And he's persona non grata in his own party. I mean, we've heard reports, we've seen examples of prominent Republican senators publicly shit talking McConnell. Like Josh Hawley is a good example of the schmuck from Missouri, the one who on the J6 footage, if you gotten to this point, the one who held his fist up to the rioters, and then they caught him on camera running down the hallway away from them. That asshole. So he's like shit talking McConnell because McConnell is seen as insufficiently loyal to Trump. And I also don't know if you know this, but McConnell's going to serve out the rest of his term. But after the election in November, he's resigning from leadership. He's basically doing what Nancy Pelosi did and basically saying, fuck it, I'm not going to be the Republican leader anymore.
Wait,
so right now,
is she actually? I thought she kept talking about it, but she hasn't actually yet.
No. She didn't resign from Congress. She resigned from the leadership. She's no longer part of the Democratic. She is not part of the Democratic leadership at all on paper. She of course still carries enormous influence because she's Nancy goddamn Pelosi, but she's not the minority whip or the minority vice whip or anything like that. She is just the representative from that one district in California. And so McConnell is a victim of his own making, I think, in a way by Trump. But I was going to ask you this too, because we haven't had a chance to talk about it. But the Supreme Court thing, I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth. I'm happy where you are on Supreme Court reform and how aggressively you're pushing it. But I am curious. I do want to know, what was the thing that tipped you over in terms of, nah, fuck this, we need to revisit how we do this? Or maybe it wasn't one thing, I don't know, but like if there was a specific thing, I am curious.
I always say this. I don't know if people believe me or not. I always say this. I don't expect anybody to change their mind in an instant ever in a debate. I don't. But when I hear things, I do reconsider them over the next few days. Like I make time in the day where I sit and I think about things. It'll either be when I'm downstairs, like I will think about things that I've heard that I feel like they haven't fully settled yet. I had an argument with Pisco, and I pretty virulently attacked this idea, or I rejected this idea, because I think it was Pisco that told me, he was like, the Republicans will never confirm someone again. And I think my argument against it was like, listen, like I'm sure they did it in the last year, but there's no way for 4 years. You're saying that if Kamala gets elected and somebody steps down immediately, you think Republicans will hold it up for 4 years? You think they won't appoint or they won't approve a Supreme Court justice? And I was pretty adamant that could never happen. But I just thought about that more over the next couple days, and maybe it's because I'm so steeped in all the January 6th stuff. I actually don't know. If Donald Trump were to put out the call, and it's also one thing that I never realized as much as well, and again, especially going over this J6 stuff, now I see the patterns way more clearly. Donald Trump is very much a dictator in terms of how he runs his party, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you're not doing what Donald Trump wants, he always reminds people when they were elected, because of him, I helped you. What a schmuck I was. Problem with this Brian Kemp loser, right? We helped you. He always reminds people that if you backstab him, you're gone, right? The voters are going to remember in 2022. They'll remember who wasn't loyal to us. They'll remember who didn't help. If you do end up backstabbing him, your political career in the Republican Party is gone, right? My parents think, I don't know if this is the broad opinion, but my parents think McCarthy is a rhino. Is that normal for most Republicans now?
So what's funny is he's pretty loyal to Trump, especially now that he's out of power. He's fundraising for Trump and everything. But yeah, he was seen as a rhino.
Yeah, McCarthy. Would you have imagined that? Would you have imagined that a few years ago, before the whole House fiasco, that McCarthy would be a rhino?
No, he bent the knee to him. He was. You could make the argument, Stephen, that if there's any single person. If there is one person who is singularly responsible for Donald Trump's political rehabilitation, you can make the argument that it was Kevin McCarthy going down to Mar-a-Lago after January 6th and basically bringing elected establishment Republicans back into the fold. Mm-hmm. You could make that argument. That's how loyal he was.
Yeah, so I mean, he really does run this shit like a dictatorship. Like if you backstab him, or I say backstab him, what I really mean is if you oppose any part of anything he says ever. That's true of his party. It's also true of the media apparatus. Remember, Fox News did the Dominion lies because they were so scared because Trump was attacking them. Remember, Trump lost his fucking mind after that Arizona call. And Donald Trump was starting to make all these other appearances on other media networks because he thought that Fox News were traitors. And remember, we've seen this on Twitter, on X, within the past month, I think, right? When a bad poll comes out, what does Donald Trump do? He comes out, and I think it was a Fox News poll, wasn't it? Where he says like, they do fake polling now, or it's not trustworthy. So you're in this state where you're constantly beholden to this guy, in a way that even Republicans have never done in the past that I've been aware of. And it's insane the way that he runs stuff. So as I start to think about that more, and then I revisit the argument I had with Pisco, would Republicans stop Democrats from ever nominating or appointing another Supreme Court justice? I don't think so. But if Donald Trump told them not to, they absolutely wouldn't if Donald Trump was still popular in the party. So I think that's the thing that started to shift my mind a lot. And reading the Supreme Court case opinions, especially on the Colorado thing, especially on the immunity thing, and then seeing how fucked the composition of the Supreme Court is now, and for who knows how many years, another, 2 decades? When are we supposed to? Yeah, is going to be this conservative of a court. So yeah, fuck that, and fuck me, and fuck the Supreme Court right now. Yeah, it's really bad.
Yeah, I like I said, I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth because I think that you have the right of it. But I was curious to see what exactly the tipping point was. For me, listening to go ahead.
Write that down and remember that. I want to respond to something real quick in chat.
Yeah,
Somebody said this, and I'm so glad you said this. Okay, good job. You're becoming norm-pilled. Aaron Dallin said, "What kind of president has key head media figures on speed dial and will directly call any government worker he wants to manipulate?" Yes, that is so strange, very queer, very unprofessional, very norm-shattering, and very that should make you wonder, is it normal? Did Barack Obama call in to MSNBC to complain about Bush or McConnell? Was that just an ordinary thing? Or was Barack Obama calling states saying hey, why haven't you guys, I don't even know what the deal would have been back then. It's very, very, very weird, very strange, very not good. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, well, also, again, I don't know if we talked about this, but let's set aside Trump's lingering influence, his direct tyrannical influence on party politics, even when he's out of power. I mean, when he says shit, he's implied it multiple times that he's violated the Logan Act by having conversations with foreign dignitaries and stuff like that. And I think I even asked you, what the FBI you think would be looking at, to potentially investigate if it would need to be more than a couple of statements or whatever. But yeah, he gives the impression that he's way too involved in the internal mechanisms of governance. I understand that he's still running for office and everything, but yeah, to your point, it's he has not loosened his grip at all. For me, I listening to people like Jamie Raskin and Sheldon Whitehouse, who are one's a Democratic senator and the other one's a Democratic congressman, you should definitely, if you ever get, I mean, you've seen Raskin because he's part of the January 6th select committee, so you've read.
Oh, I have the guy with the hair.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know you're talking about.
No, he's really, really good. He's a constitutional scholar, and he was the one who he wrote this op-ed. I think it was in the Washington Post back in 2019, and I didn't read it until a few years ago. But it was basically debunking the myth of 3 equal branches. He's we don't have 3 equal branches. We have 3 separate branches who are all powerful, or who are each powerful, I should say. And there's checks and balances generating from all of them. But he's the branches were never conceived to be equal. There was a top-down order in some respects. Congress was always meant to be the most powerful, the president the second most powerful, and the Supreme Court the least powerful one. When you and I did our segment earlier today, and I mentioned that Justice Jackson was interviewed by CNN, she also mentions this in the interview. She's the court is meant to be the least dangerous of the branches. It's supposed to be the least active, the least dangerous, the least influential in a lot of respects. A bit of a brake check, but not something that can just grind the entire government to a halt.
Sure. Although I will say that I don't like the term powerful, because it's there's so many different ways you can measure that.
Sure.
What do you think is more powerful? If I were to ask you, what's more powerful? A car that can go 0 to 60 in 1 second, but it gets 5 miles per gallon, versus a car that can go 0 to 60 in 1.2 seconds, but it gets 100 miles per gallon. In terms of raw power, the faster 0 to 60 is probably faster, but damn, it says a lot for how different, the fuel consumption is between the two vehicles. The Supreme Court has less power than the Congress, but the Congress needs so much to get itself off the ground, and the Supreme Court could theoretically, wave a magic wand and do some crazy shit in government. So
no.
I think, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, I think it's a great point. I mean, power is measured differently. So Pisco and I have this on our weekly podcast. We fight on this all the time, because there's no doubt that the executive, I would say in most, in terms of day-to-day operations, there's no question that the executive branch is by far the most dangerous and by far the most powerful, because to your point, Congress has to divide its power between 535 voting members, 100 in the Senate, 435 in the House. And in order to get any shit done, they actually have to go through the president, right, who either signs it into law or vetoes it, and then it has to go through supermajorities to override the veto, right? So to your point, it's so unwieldy, which is why so many legislatures across the world are actually unicameral instead of bicameral. However, the president all executive power is vested in one person. And yes, it's delegated to, tens of thousands of bureaucrats and operatives and stuff like that. But it's much easier for the executive to wield power than the legislature or the judiciary. So take your point, but when I interviewed Sheldon Whitehouse, like my thing was like, effectively in the system as we currently understand it, the court can strike down executive orders with judicial review. They can strike down federal statutes with judicial review. And the court has also either been structured or relies on people believing it's structured as to basically remove itself from checks and balances. What I mean by that is, so think about it. They can strike down what the president does. They can strike down what Congress does. And at the same time they do that, they're also saying, hey, you can't even impose an ethics requirement on us. So it's almost the way I told Sheldon Whitehouse is it's like, if you can tell me what to do, but I can't tell you what to do, are we equals, or is one of us really the boss of the other? And so that's what I mean by power. Like the way we currently look at the court, we give it such deference that for all practical purposes, what can the president do to check the court under our current system in your mind? I can't think of a single fucking thing.
Well, it really depends on how you say this, right? Because technically, the president could just not do what the court says, right?
But you would see that as not. I imagine, maybe I'm wrong, maybe because that's happened before. President Lincoln famously defied the Supreme Court, or at least Supreme Court justice, when he suspended writ of habeas corpus. Supreme Court justice, I think it was Taney, was like, "Hey, you can't arrest this person."
That wasn't, and the court or whatever didn't pass that was still technically done through all the proper stuff, right? Or am I wrong on that?
So Lincoln eventually got Congress's support to suspend habeas corpus, but he didn't have it at the time that he did it and then ignored the court. So he did it, ignored the court when the court told him no, then he got Congress to back him up and the court kind of backed off. But to your point, it's true that the president doesn't have to listen to the court, but presumably you would not consider that so much a check and balance as it is the president behaving unconstitutionally, right? Like the president...
Yeah, for sure.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would assume you'd be saying the president can't or shouldn't just ignore the court.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's like, to me, this can't work this way. It's like we can't have one branch dispense checks and balances to the other two branches and not be checked in turn, which is why I don't know where I stand on the president ignoring the court. I feel like that's the only check they meaningfully have against is just to sometimes say, break glass in case of emergency.
I
guess you could prosecute him.
There's two things going on. Technically, this gets really theory civics filled, or civics into. They appoint, so the nomination comes from the president, and the appointment is confirmed by the Senate, is arguably one form of a check. And then the other check is that I think impeachment can start in the Senate for a Supreme Court justice.
So it starts in the House, and then the Senate. Okay. Yeah. So, but I take your point. That's one check, but that's from Congress. I was asking.
Well, I was just saying. So that's a form of check, but technically, I think in a perfect world, I don't know if I'm incorrect on this. I think in a perfect world, you don't actually ever want there to be a check on the Supreme Court from either of the other two branches of government, because the Supreme Court is only supposed to be there for interpretation and law review. They're not supposed to be doing things to pass a check and balance on the executive or on the legislature. They're just supposed to make sure that they're comporting with the words of the Constitution for the legislature, and then for the executive comporting with the acts from the legislature, technically, right, and the Constitution.
Yeah, but they are supposed to be. Maybe the checks and balances are supposed to be more frequent or more frequently applied coming from some branches against other branches. But I'm sure you would agree that the founders did not intend for the court to be an uncheckable branch. So
they didn't intend for them to be uncheckable, but they did want them to have a lot of independence, right? The lifetime appointment
but also,
is a really big deal. Yeah,
no, I take your point, but also be by far the least active and the least dangerous, right? That's the thing. That's the thing that I get so frustrated. I'm not saying with you, but with people who defend Lactoid. I'm going to pick on Lactoid. Here's the third person I'm going to call out.
You can pick on him. He's a horrendous person, terrible human being, bad actor. Yes.
Yeah, and so-called principled nonpartisan, when in fact he's just really happy about this configuration of the court. That's really all it is. With all due respect to him, the thing that frustrates me, it's I can't wrap my head around the court as conceived by conservatives in the moment, because what it sounds like to me is they're like, okay, yes, it is an anti-democratic institution. Yes, it's an anti-majoritarian institution. Yes, they should serve for life. I have people in my replies and people I see, I'm sure some of the conservative lawyers that you argue with, not just Lactoid, but Good Logic and others, think that, a code of conduct would be compromising judicial independence. Basically, they should have no checks against them whatsoever. And the founders intended for them to be this uncheckable branch that can tell the other branches what to do, and we just have to trust that they're going to do the right thing. The Democrat in me, the lowercase d Democrat in me, I can't abide that. It's like the founders, to be really reductive, the founders were like, okay, you get to be independent. The trade-off is you f*** off. 99.999999% of governance has to be done by the other two branches. You fuck off. You're the weakest. You're the frail. It should give you a goddamn panic attack at the thought of interfering with Congress or the president. You should, if a Supreme Court justice wants to defy the president, you should be on the verge of an aneurysm.
Sure.
That's the trade-off.
I think the scary part is, I think the issue is I think that we've had like a historic failure of the American people to support the legislature. And when the legislature can't act and we need action, then what happens is the executive and the court steps in to fulfill the deficits of the legislature, right? What are we going to do about, immigrants of children or children of immigrants that are here? Fuck. Well, the legislature can't figure anything out. Well, what the fuck are we? Okay, DACA. All right, boom. Okay, DACA, at least from my very brief understanding of it, is quite improper. That the president of the United States is using what is a very small amount of allotted kind of like temporary refugee or asylum seeker or whatever assistance to basically create a class of citizens that are now protected from immigration and customs enforcement. It's kind of bizarre. The president probably should. DACA feels bad to me in terms of powers of what should be in the government, right?
Right. Or even if you agree with the end, you recognize that the mechanism by which the end is achieved is at best constitutionally dubious.
Yeah, and then same thing with, unfortunately, it feels like a lot of the social progress that we've made has come from the Supreme Court. I really don't like the idea that we got gay marriage from the Supreme Court, that we got abortion.
So Obergefell in 2015. Now, I will say that is actually reinforced by federal statute now because in 2022, they passed the Freedom for Marriage Act or Respect for Marriage Act, which basically codified Obergefell protections. But that was basically 7 years later, to the point.
But I mean, same thing with Roe and Casey for abortion. And I think there was one other big thing that came from the Supreme Court. But I mean, obviously the Brown v. Board, it was obviously, but I think there was a more recent example, but I can't think of it. But when you're starting to get so many massive and huge important things from the executive and from the judicial, you're necessarily increasing their importance and their power. And now it's like, okay, well, fuck, now we have a really powerful court that wasn't supposed to be this powerful, but because our Congress is unable to do anything, and we look to the court for so much, like in terms of protections, like, yeah, what the fuck, Yeah.
Well, you also gave her, bringing us full circle, you gave a really good example earlier when you pointed out that Afghanistan wasn't declared, right? That was right. Like that is a principle. You could make the argument that maybe certainly top 5 most important powers is the power and responsibility of Congress to declare war, but they have deferred so much of not just war management powers, but like war declaration, war initiating powers to the president. And so, I take your point. I don't know, like I have such an allergy at this point to the presumption of the Supreme Court. Like when you have Alito, set the flag shit aside. You have the ethics things with Clarence Thomas, like more than $1 million in undeclared gifts. Like the lack of disclosure, the lack of just honoring the spirit. Like we leave so much to good faith. And I guess that's the broader problem. So much of our system is deferential to good faith, and I understand you can never totally exercise it.
I was going to say, initially, I felt like that was so stupid. Like when we looked at the nuclear option, we looked at the Supreme Court stuff, I'm like, how dumb is it that so much of this government relies on people to just behave well? Like, shouldn't some of this stuff be like codified in terms of at least Senate rules, if not, statutorily or constitutionally? But then the more I thought about it, it's like you just said it kind of, and we both agree. You can't actually make a system that can defy bad actors. It's not possible. Everybody in the system is a bad actor. You can't possibly create a system to contain those people. And the question is how far does the system need to go? Because if you're thinking of, like, was there a system that could have stopped Trump from doing the things that he wanted to do, or could have stopped, a corrupt Congress or whatever from doing what they want to do? Because when I look at the Trump stuff, and I think I've said this exact line to you, and I'm saying it more and more. I've said so many times, I'm surprised at how strong our government is. We have like really good guardrails, all this bullshit, and not that what I just said. That's not fucking true. It had nothing. It had a little bit to do with the guardrails, and had a little bit to do with our system. But truly, what it had to do with was a lot of really good people that were in this system, involved from top to bottom. People who stand for a different version of America than I would ever see, but we're still fundamentally, answering their call at the end of the day to be good American citizens, whether we're talking about Pence, whether we're talking about Barr, whether we're talking about all of the lawyers in the White House, the Hirschmans, the Shorts, all these people, like all of these people were doing the right thing, not because some institutional protection existed that told them they had to, but because they believe ideologically in some version of America that they were willing to, stick their neck out and defend. And I don't think you could create a system to enforce those protections, because you can always find ways around that system,
Yeah, no, I mean, it is interesting to really contemplate these things, because like a good example, in my opinion, of one that really is unusual to me, like how cohesive it is. Not that it doesn't have its problems, but I mean, look at the United Kingdom, look at the UK. Mm-hmm. They're a constitutional monarchy, right? So, but their constitution isn't codified the way ours is. I mean, they have a body of law and tradition, but it's like scattered in like 3 or 4 different buckets. They don't have a single written document, and they still have a monarch who is technically sovereign, right? Like the King Charles is above the law. Now, if he did something particularly egregious, I'm sure the Parliament would nip that in the bud. But
sure.
And yet, I was just gonna say real quick, and yet they seem to have their shit together in ways that the United States doesn't, with a codified constitution, checks and balances, a guy who is chief executive but not sovereign. And to me, that's kind of interesting to think about. Like, they had their issues with right-wing populist Boris Johnson or whatever, but Boris Johnson on his worst day was better than Trump on his best day. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's interesting to me that you would think on paper that they'd be more fucked up or have the potential to be more fucked up than we are, and yet they're more cohered.
Yeah, I think you could say properly, like, it's de jure, it's a constitutional, or it's a monarchical, what is it, monarchical republic, or what the fuck do you call it? The constitutional monarchy? De jure, like on paper, they are that, but de facto, like in practice, the monarchy is defunct, right? Because I think most people agree that the second the monarch defies, because I think that the king or queen still has to sign everything into legislation, but if they were to refuse, it would be the end of the monarchy, right? They would be overthrown that day.
Right. There would be a Republican government. I mean, the calls for Republicanizing the UK have like really increased since Queen Elizabeth died anyway. So I think they're on borrowed time really anyway, since she's gone.
What's up, boys?
I'm sorry, you were saying.
Hey, what's up, loser? Oh, also one quick thing before Hutch derails us, because I know he wants to talk about COD. No, I'm just kidding. One thing too that I noticed that was interesting. I'm sketching out this video now that I've got all my clips and everything. So I just, in terms of like what I want the flowchart to look like. One thing I noticed that was really funny with all the conservative theories of law stuff is conservatives had like 3 different huge ways that they wanted to flip the J6, the certification stuff, and all of them rely on these very esoteric theories of like authoritarian power. For Trump, it was this idea of like the unitary executive theory, right? That that basically, as the president, he can step into the role of any single person in the executive branch at any point in time that he wants to and do anything he wants for whatever.
Right.
And, that's always right. For the state legislatures, I was really hoping, maybe you can correct me real quick if I'm wrong, I thought that there was some crazy constitutional like legal theory about the state legislature theory. But I think it's actually as basic bitch and fucking retarded as in the Constitution, in like 2 lines, it says the state legislatures, and some insanely schizophrenic Republicans have interpreted that to mean, oh my God, the state legislatures could do this in defiance of their governors and their state constitutions and their state courts, right? Just because so that's fucking retarded.
Are you talking about independent state legislature theory?
Yes.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So there was that interpretation. So you have the unitary executive idea, which is fucking retarded and unconstitutional and not supported by any credible legal scholar, at least not the field. You've got the independent state legislature idea, which is comically fucking retarded. And then you had this third idea, which was, how Pence was supposed to defy the ECA because of the 12th Amendment. The idea that the executive branch could just start making constitutional theories up about how they want to defy rules from Congress in order to entrench their power as well. All of these things are powered by these different quasi-authoritarian theories for how to like run the government, and none of these things were like broadly supported by basically anybody, which I just thought was funny and stupid. But yeah, go ahead.
No, the independent state legislature theory, in my opinion, I don't want to say it's the weakest one. It may be first or second. I think unitary executive theory is interesting to me because there are like two versions of it. You have strong unitary executive theory and weak unitary executive theory. I've read a lot of constitutional scholars who are like, weak unitary executive theory makes sense. This idea that the president's obviously supposed to be the most powerful and the pinnacle of the executive branch and have broad plenary power, but that it's not totally uncheckable. The Congress is supposed to be able to intrude on executive branch duties. They're supposed to be able to, you have Senate confirmation of executive branch officials. So that's a check of the legislature interfering, quote unquote, with the executive. And even like right now, so under current federal law, and maybe the Supreme Court would decide differently, but like special counsels, like the president it's not recognized that the president has the power to fire a special counsel. Mm-hmm. They have to order the attorney general to fire the special counsel. So it's strange where, we talk about how all of their power derives from the president, right? Which is true, but there's supposed to be like certain carve outs. So I think we all buy into unitary executive theory, just the weak version where it's like there are asterisks there. There's room for Congress and the courts to intervene. Independent state legislature theory is just bullshit. And I don't know if I still feel that the vice president violating the ECA, I think that's probably the weakest of the three theories, but maybe you disagree. Maybe you think independent state legislature theory is more ridiculous, but
sure. What do you want, Hutch?
I don't know why Jessiah invited me. This is a boring conversation.
What the fuck, man? Listen, we're philosophizing. We're philosophizing about government. Destiny and I are world building, how we design a government from top down or bottom up to fix the problems here.
I'm supposed to debate somebody tomorrow about who's the bigger threat to democracy, Republicans or Democrats. And I was just thinking today that isn't it funny that in the last 8 years, Republicans have been making a point to say that we're not a democracy, we're a constitutional republic?
Don't even bring that shit around here. Hold on. Can you tell me if you agree?
What do you mean by threat to democracy?
Is it the case? I want this not to be the case. And then Connor fucking repeated it in a conversation. Is it the case that Republicans say we're not a democracy, we're a republic because democracy sounds like Democrat and republic sounds like Republican?
I think it's because of the Electoral College losses. I think that's their cope. I don't know. I think it's for a few reasons. Why do you think they say it?
I think it is because of what I just said. I think it's because democracy sounds like Democrat and republic sounds like Republican. So they think we're not a democracy, we're a republic.
It's both.
Maybe.
So
because the Electoral College has nothing to do with a republic, really, right? Does it?
Well, no, it's just when he lost the popular vote, that was like the big cope in 2016 is, she won the popular vote by 3 million votes. And that's when I noticed them starting to say it more and more. Well, it's like, we're not a democracy. And
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's both. Legion Miller has a really good video essay about like kind of the origins of this cope, and it's both. That there's credible reason to believe that the names, the labels being too similar, like if you keep extolling the virtues of democracy, that just by sheer marketing you're gonna confer more legitimacy to Democrats, the party. But the other thing is the Republicans know that they lack broad popular support, and that they're certainly at the federal level they need affirmative action in the form of the Electoral College and gerrymandering and stuff like that. It's the idea that we don't care about popular vote. This country was not built on popular vote or popular majorities. It was about protecting the minority from the tyranny of the majority and that sort of shit. And it's not just, by the way, I don't know if Connor told you this, but it's not just prominent Republicans. You actually have Republican senators. Mike Lee, who used to be a really respected constitutional scholar before whatever fucking worm died in RFK Jr.'s head was reborn in his. He's the one like really spreading that around. We're not a democracy, we're a republic.
Nice.
Yeah, he tweeted that, and I think it's also a mixture of things where the reason why they call us the Democrat Party is because they don't want to like cede the term democracy to us, and it sounds like rat.
Okay.
Like it's actually like a juvenile kind of a.
I think I grew up listening to so much like Michael Savage and like Ann Coulter and Glenn Beck and all that. I interchangeably use Democrat and Democratic. Because it's just out of habit. And I had somebody email me once, I think like 5 years ago, and they were like, stop calling them Democrats. That's just a slur. And I'm like, wait, what? I had no idea. But I think it actually is. I think you're right on that. Yeah, Democrat is like a slur.
You can call somebody a Democrat.
But when you say the Democrat Party or the, yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when you debate whether or not so-and-so is a threat to democracy, make sure you iron out exactly what the prompt means, and that it doesn't mean that Trump is literally 100% going to overthrow democracy. Make sure you have that worked out, Hutch. You don't want to repeat.
Why I agreed to this, because I feel like we've all probably had this debate like 1,000 times.
Wait, go over this again. What's your debate and who's it with?
Is this guy named Lactoid? Are you guys familiar with him?
Oh God, yeah.
He apparently requested to debate me on Wick's panel. And I was like, oh, okay.
But what?
Yeah, the prompt is, who is more of a threat to democracy, the Democrats or Republicans?
You honestly, oh shit. Okay, hold on. Josiah wasn't joking. You need to 100% clarify what that is beforehand. Because we had debates with people that were, some of the most retarded motherfuckers in the world. Wait, you were in that debate?
Yeah, he was there.
I was on here.
Don't forget the crucial lessons of that.
Yeah, never mind. Yeah, you were in that debate. Okay, yeah. So then you need to iron out that. Yeah, holy fuck. Oh my God, that was fucking AIDS.
What was their wiggle room again? I forgot.
Wiggle room. They were just saying threat to democracy means that Donald Trump is going to come in and absolutely you have to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that he's going to destroy democracy in a way that it can never come back. Because remember, when I asked Sean in that panel, wait a second, so using this definition, then the Civil War, was that a threat to democracy? Sean was like, well, that's a good question. I have to think about that. So that means that whatever you're going to prove, you have to prove that Donald Trump's going to do worse than the fucking Civil War. Okay?
Right. But, The Andrew Wilson tact.
Yeah.
So, boys, you feeling more confident about this election now? I'm filled with hope for the first time. I predicted that Kamala was going to beat his ass. I'm usually the one saying the sky is falling, we're going to die. I'm feeling a resurgent sense of optimism. I'm feeling good. How do you two feel?
We've had some really good polls, some really good high-quality pollsters, too. So Yahoo has Harris +4, Times YouGov, Harris +4. TIPP Harris +4, Data for Progress Harris +4, Reuters Harris +5, and that's just been in the last 3 days.
Sure, I don't think I care at all about the national polling though, right? We're on to the 5 to 7 states or the 6 or 7 states is what we're really talking about, right?
Right.
Yeah, those are. Wisconsin and Michigan are her most comfortable leads. Pennsylvania's within a point. North Carolina's within a point. Georgia, Nevada, Arizona. But
hey, did you see that Trump's campaign guy Chris LaCivita is apparently? He's publicly panicking that Colin Allred's going to beat Cruz in Texas.
No, wait, what? When did this happen?
I'll send you the link. But he's like Texas is a shit show. I know who's responsible. We need to get competent professionals to take over Ted Cruz's campaign. He seems panicked that Allred's going to beat Cruz in Texas. Wouldn't that be fucking great?
Well, right now the MAGA cope is that they fully expect the polling error to be in Trump's favor, like it was in 2016.
If Lactoid wants perms, they can always have perms.
But there's no reason to assume that trend is going to continue. I mean, the polling error was in Obama's favor in 2012. These things shift around, and all the pollsters have shifted their methodology since 2020, and they've been underselling Democrats consistently for 2 years. So I feel really good. I mean, it would not shock me if she won all 7 swing states. I don't know if that's cope, but
oof.
All right, calm the fuck down. I'm not going to go that far, but I'm sorry.
We're going after. Do you remember it was in 2020 when Sargon and friends were like, the election is fucking over because Donald Trump won Florida and Texas. Do you remember that?
No.
You know, there was some huge, I don't want to call it but there was some crazy polls that came out for, I think it was for Florida and Texas, and people were saying oh my God, Biden might win, Florida and Texas is so crazy or whatever. And then when those 2 states ended up being obviously in Trump's favor, people were already celebrating, Republicans were already celebrating, and it was Biden has no fucking chance. It's fucking, okay, never mind. This is just my online crazy people.
No, I can do you one better. You got to remember the 50 state landslide from
Tim Pool. Who's the Barstool guy again? What's that guy's name again? Portnoy?
Mike Portnoy.
Portnoy came out with a video, I think that night, doing a premature victory lap, and it's one of the most chef's kiss videos of all time, because he's just liberals, he won, you just got to get over it, we got to unite now. And it was great.
Yeah, I feel much better. I mean, obviously, with all the institutional advantages, I'm not saying that he can't win. Clearly, he can win. But if you held a gun to my head and forced me to bet, I would say she wins. But it could also be like me thinking to myself, there's no fucking way after all this that we would elect that asshole back. But I don't know.
Never mind. I forgot.
So, Steven, you haven't said if you feel better or not. Hutch and I are feeling better. Do you feel better? Are you still...
Oh, they were going to win? I don't know. Who knows? Anything could happen. Yeah. I think we're going to win, but yeah, we'll see.
You got a lot of trust issues at this point with the American people, the American electorate.
Yeah.
Honestly, though, I mean, the American electorate has a lot of trust issues right now.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it's
pretty crazy.
I feel like a lot of people have PTSD from 2016, how close it was in 2020. And they just refuse to believe that she's ahead. And I think it's entirely possible that she's going to win by larger margins than the polls are currently projecting, given the current trends of underselling Democrats. And we're going to look back on the stress of she's only up 3 nationally, and she's got this institutional advantage disadvantage with the Electoral College, and it's all just going to look silly.
I just remember what I was going to say. One argument that came up in that Charlie Kirk Jubilee thing that I really like, I'm going to start using this forever, is that the Senate is DEI for conservatives. Yeah. That idea, what you're talking about is, because the national polling and the fact that the Senate exists, it truly is. Like in spirit, it is DEI. The idea that representation matters, representation is important, and that's why in the Senate we equally represent like all 50 states. I like that one. That's a good one.
No, I mean there was one, Hutch, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this stat, but I want to say, was it 2020 or 2021? I don't know if the numbers have changed, but 50 Democrats represented 48 million more people than 50 Republicans in the Senate. Like, that's man. Mm-hmm. That really is.
No, California alone has 40 million people. So, I mean, and if you take the least populous states in the country, it's like they get like combined fucking 18 or 20 senators, and we get 2. So it's pretty untenable. I feel like it makes the filibuster, like abolishing the filibuster, more or less inevitable. I feel like both parties are talking about it pretty openly at this point, and it's just a matter of who pulls the trigger first. Yeah. And I understand that there's downsides there. I understand that there's volatile swings, but honestly, I feel like that's probably the better option than where we're at now.
Do we even have a filibuster right now, technically?
Yeah,
like, really?
We do.
You don't think that, like, if it was something meaningful, you don't think we would just go back to the cloture vote and then you would just say fuck it and do what you want to do?
Well, they can do those carve outs, right? So like the great thing about Senate rules is apparently you can just write whatever the fuck you want, and you don't have to abolish the filibuster wholesale. You can make a carve out. You can make an exception for, like, we tried to do it with the John Lewis Voting Rights Act to expand voter registration and voter eligibility and like stuff like that, make it easier to vote. The idea was, okay, we don't have to get rid of the filibuster in every fucking context, but we can vote. Basically, the majority can vote to make an exception for the filibuster on any given piece of legislation.
Yeah, I mean,
but Manchin and Sinema wouldn't go for it.
Well, once you do that, though, I feel like Republicans are just going to, at that point, it's just effectively gone. Because, like, if you get rid of it for one piece of legislation or 2 or abortion or whatever, then Republicans maybe the next time around are just going to be like, fuck it. And so,
Steven, are you there yet? Like, I know you're getting a based reformer on the Supreme Court. How do you feel about the filibuster?
I still feel like it's good. I still feel like needing 60 votes is good. I think that, like, I think there should be some form of bipartisanship on bills. It seems crazy to me that you either have to have a 60 vote majority or we have to be able to pass it with 51 votes. Like, I think Biden has shown you can do it, right?
I mean, he's definitely succeeded more than I thought. There's a really good. So when he said, maybe Hutch disagreed. Maybe Hutch was always optimistic on this front. But I remember vividly when he became the nominee and he was campaigning and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to work across the aisle." And think, motherfucker, do you not remember what they said to your last, like your boss, your former boss? Like they were going to make him a one-term president. They weren't going to work with him on anything. Why the fuck do you think that you'll be any different? And he proved me wrong. He was able to get a lot done bipartisanly. But I just think the appetite. I mean, it's like he got more done than I expected. Certainly a hell of a lot less done than he expected. And
you think he got less done than he expected?
Oh, sure. I think I think that Biden expected to get more done by for example, when they took the majority in the House, I think Biden was under the impression, or at least hoped, that a House Republican majority would still be able to pass legislation with him. But he's basically had a lame duck presidency since January 2023. Thank God.
What makes you say that?
Say what?
What makes you say that Biden had that expectation? Because I feel like he probably knew. Because I mean,
well, based on what he said publicly, that he knows how to work in good faith with Republicans and all the bipartisan successes that we'll be able to work bipartisanly. Even when he said, by the way, that he was going to drop out of the 2024 election, he said, we still have X number of months left in my presidency, and there's still a lot more to be done. It doesn't make any sense to me. Not only did he heavily imply it, but it doesn't make any sense to me that he would tout bipartisan successes. And then the second that they regain control of one chamber, that he expected, okay, fuck, that's the end of that. Because if they're willing to work with him bipartisanly in the minority, I don't see why they wouldn't be in the majority, right? Something changed. We have a bad faith Republican House majority now, and I think Biden recognizes that the time for bipartisanship is over. I mean, I think he is now well aware that there's no bipartisanship left to be had. I think he basically exhausted the last vestiges of it. As long as Trump is the leader of the GOP, why should anyone expect any more bipartisanship? Fuck, they were publicly threatened. The ones who worked with him on the bipartisan infrastructure law, like Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Trump bitched and pissed and moaned because they gave Biden a political win. Look at what happened.
Tucker Carlson reportedly called a senator, I can't remember which one, and said, if you vote for this immigration bill, I will end your career.
Bro, yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. I think what Biden got done was really extraordinary, but I think that's it. As long as Trump is head of this party, I don't think there's any more bipartisanship left to be had. So there's a really good book called Tyranny of the Minority, and it's written by two Harvard political scientists. And I think Steven's on Vyvanse now, so he likes to read. I'll send you a copy. You should definitely check it out because they make a really compelling case that something should be outside the purview of a simple majority. So like constitutional amendments, yeah, that should require a supermajority. Impeachments and stuff like that. Yeah, you want a decisive, overwhelming majority for things, but they make a really compelling case that why should the day-to-day legislation, why should all legislation require supermajorities? And I'm being really reductive here, but they make the case listen, 2 out of 10 things should require a supermajority. 8 out of 10 things, nah. If the majority wins, the majority should be able to have its way. And I think they make a really compelling case for it, as opposed to just leaving it all up to a 60 vote supermajority.
I'm going to leave you boys to your political esoteric.
I'm pretty much done here too. I wanted to pick Steven's brain about the Supreme Court. Now that he's leading a crusade against it, and I'm proud of him.
Have a good weekend, boys.
I love you. Be careful, buddy.
I see you, Hutch. Last question for you, Steven. The stuff that we recorded today and you recorded with Pisco, because I didn't see any of the Pisco and Loanerbox stuff from last week. Will you be uploading it onto your main channel, different channel?
Ideally, it gets uploaded immediately. I think August is sleeping. We need to talk about the timetable for that. But it should go on main channel for now. I might start throwing that on. I might make that Bridges content. Because 1, I want to record it in the studio downstairs, and then 2, if it's official political stuff, the Bridges channel is a lot more neat for stuff like that. And then it gives a place to go and look at stuff of mine that's not unhinged or crazy drama. But I don't know. I haven't 100% figured that out yet. But I'll probably do 3 or 4 iterations of this where we iron out the format a bit. And then I'll try to collect feedback through the autistic fucking rumblings of my retarded fucking community. And then I'll figure out what needs to change, and then we'll go from there. Yeah.
Perfect. Did you record anything last week when I was out, with Pisco or Loanerbox, or did
No, because Pisco couldn't make his segment, and you have people dying all around you, so you couldn't make your segment. So it would have just been Loanerbox.
It's not death; it's marriage. Okay, this is renewed life. The two shall become one, and all that nonsense. All right, buddy. Well, listen, you enjoy the rest of this panel. It's good chatting with you, and I'll talk to you later.
Yeah, I love you. Be careful.
Love you too, buddy. Bye.
Let me use the restroom real quick. Hold on 1 second.
Harris is just like Biden is an empty suit that people behind the scenes will be running. The same people behind the scenes running the Biden economy or administration will be running hers. So the same people that will be in charge under Harris will be in charge there. The American people have rejected, and the data shows that economic data is abysmal.
Not only that,
but that's the truth.
But people are going right now. Hang on, real quick, Ira, and then I'll turn right over. But right now, people are experiencing high gas prices, high grocery prices. Their day-to-day living, expenses have shot through the roof. And you're moving into this election promising them, well, in the future it'll be better, when under Trump it already was better. So it's
what is Trump going to do about any of this? Has he named a single policy that would help on any of the inflation?
easy for people when they're moving into the voting booth in order for Republicans to point this out, and that's what people are talking about. That's what all the buzz is.
Yeah, I want to jump in.
I know you want to jump in, Gibbs, but we had two righties. We have to have a left to respond. Then I'll throw it back to you, Gibbs. I'm sorry, but there has to be a balance.
I just want to ask my conservative panel people, like, if everything you're saying right now, that Biden's presidency has just been this disaster for everybody, why isn't he up 10 points right now?
Gibbs, you want to respond to that?
He was dominating against Biden. Like, and part of what Kamala's doing is
he's not now. Why isn't he being
going against Kamala now, right?
Everybody's miserable, right?
Because she's not Biden. I mean, here's the thing. The Republicans and a lot of like average people are looking at this as like the age-old expression. A bird in hand is better than two in the bush, right? They know what they got with Trump. They don't know what they're getting with Kamala. It's a whole lot of nothing. We know y'all been lying to us the whole time. The jobs report, it was lying. You literally just lied on this panel and said only 5% of people have side jobs. According to Market Watch, as of April 16th, 54% of people have side gigs. That's a lot more than 5%.
54% of people are working more than one job. Is that true? Percentage of Americans working multiple jobs. What would I guess this number to be? If I think like somebody who does, if we're including like just Ubering like somebody one time or DoorDashing one time, I feel like it could be as high as 20%. Well, if you're a 40, 50-year-old person who's working outside of like a degree career, would you be doing Uber or Door? I don't know how often people just do it once or twice, or like very sparingly. I wonder how much that counts. Is it like once in the past year? If it was that sparingly, maybe that number could be. I don't know. Let's find out. Okay, 50%. That seems so high, but let's find out. This isn't saying gigs. I think this is just for employed people, right? What did he cite? What did he mention?
About 5% of people have side jobs. According to Market Watch, as of April 16th, 54%.
Market Watch, 54% gig job. Oh no. Are side hustles the new normal? 54% of Americans say they've taken on side gigs. This is saying taken on a side hustle. I wonder what that counts as. Like if you sell Mary Kay or something, is that... Any drama today? Yeah, I think Hassan. This number seems impossibly high. I'm so curious if they have this broken down somewhere. Like 71% of Gen Z are working two jobs. I don't believe that. I wonder if it could be based on the people that are working, and of the people that are working, maybe for Gen Z, they'd be doing like Uber and DoorDash, maybe. I'm not sure. Or is a job outside of school? I wonder if that counts as like a side hustle. Oh, or TikToks, maybe. What is a side hustle? So it's a job, business, or opportunity that generates extra income on top of your primary job. See, like, depending on what this is, this could be so broad. Like, let's say that your friend says, like, hey, listen, we're moving some shit down by the docks. We'll give you, like, $50 if you come and help us on Saturday. If somebody said that one time in the past year, would you would have answered yes then in this survey? Control F, methodology. We weighted responses to align with population demographics across age, gender, and income status to be representative of all U.S. adults. The margin of error is plus or minus 3% with 95 confidence. We identified those with a side hustle as respondents who answered yes to the question. In the past 12 months, have you taken on an opportunity for extra income in addition to your primary source? Oh, okay. Then this is a lot more believable. But I wonder if they restricted this. Did they say they restricted this to people working? In addition to your primary source, because that would also mean that, let's say that you go to school and you get like student loans and you just do DoorDash on the side, you would still answer yes to this because that's an opportunity for extra income in addition to your primary source. Or if you're a student and you mow lawns for your grandma, you would say yes to this, right? Like I would answer yes to this question, right? So this is kind of this isn't silly. Not to say this data is worthless, but this is a lot different than saying you work multiple jobs. But
4% of people have side gigs. That's a lot more than 5%, Papa. I'm sorry. You're on this line. Yeah, Market Watch. I can post it for you. I got it. Yeah, Market Watch. I got it. I got the link if you need it. I knew people were going to ask for sources. Papa Gibbs getting ready. Secondly, if we go back to my notes here, y'all threw a de facto coup after y'all told us, hey, for months, years, Biden was fine. And y'all took Biden down quicker than a whore on nickel night. That motherfucker was stacking out there so fast. I've never
dropped
seen
him like a prom dress. Dropped him like a prom dress.
He's literally on the beach drinking.
And we pressured him out, and now our current candidate is beating the election.
And it was based on glad we did it.
He's literally drinking. He's literally drinking.
Wait, I can't wait. Stop, guys. There's 3 people talking at the same time. Gibbs, wait. Gibbs, I'll give you.
In addition to primary source does it imply it's only counting people who have a primary source? Well, but I don't know what it would consider like a primary source of income. Like, are your parents a primary source of income if they just give you money for school?
15 more seconds, then we'll have a lefty respond, and I'm throwing it over to Turk because Turk is going to cry. I can see the pain on his face.
He's literally on the beach sitting here drinking Mai Tais. Whenever we look at Trump, when he left office, inflation 1.9%. It went up 9% in the first year Biden went up, and it's gone skyrocketed. Since then, it's been dog shit ever since the
Biden. Why did it go up around the world then? Why did inflation go up around the world? Are you responsible for that?
Yeah, with the superpower.
Could it have something to do with the world reserve currency being the dollar?
What does that mean when the world reserve currency? What does that even mean, bro? He has no idea.
You think it's the world reserve currency? That's why.
What's the lingua franca?
Why is it that inflation grew across the world? Andrew, go ahead.
Bro, of course, American policies and American economics are going to affect inflation all over the world. I just did. I just answered it.
Money, not enough good.
They don't like your answer, so it's not going to count.
Which policies?
Wait, Andrew, can I just ask, do you believe
which policies?
I just want to get clarification.
Which policies? Stop
Can you let them speak for 10 seconds?
Just say the whatever podcast. Why don't you answer which policy?
Okay, let's stop for a second. Andrew, what do you think caused the inflation crisis globally? And then we're going to Turk.
Which policies?
Which policies led to that?
So I would say that the Federal Reserve and the policies the Fed has, which has inflated the currency artificially. And the reason that they did this is because they needed to pump billions of dollars out into the economy for all these social relief programs, has caused not only inflation in the United States, but it has been extended to our neighbors as well. Especially anybody who...
Act into law.
Bro, you gonna let me finish?
Who signed the CARES Act into law?
You gonna let me finish?
Remember, inflation just means that the average cost, the average prices of certain goods and services is increased. But a lot of libertarians or other retarded people on the internet with no economic understanding think that inflation just means there's more money, which means that the Federal Reserve is bad, which is why the way to fix inflation is to have a gold standard. That's the economic foundation that Andrew is working off of. Inflation means more currency must have been printed and it must have come from the Federal Reserve, and the only purpose of the Federal Reserve is to ruin the whole world, and that's it. Yeah.
Sign that?
You gotta give Andrew some time to respond quick.
Yeah, let me finish, Hutch. Yeah, so I would say that was one of the primary reasons. And if you say, well, wait, bro, stop talking so I can finish my point. Remember how you were just bitching 5 seconds ago that I kept cutting you off even when I wasn't cutting you off?
Yeah, you're all cutting each other off.
Wait,
this is taking too much time to need to. Andrew, finish the question.
Literally did. Why do you think you saw everybody nodding their head? They totally agree with me. So on top of this, Pisco, just so you know, yes, they pumped it in. Now, is Donald Trump responsible for some of this policy? Yes.
What do you mean the Federal Reserve?
Wait, can we let him finish? Okay, let him finish.
Bro. Again, calm down, Pisco. Yes, Fed policy led to massive inflation. Yes, Pisco, because the United States government was pumping billions of dollars artificially in order to take care of this Relief Act. Now,
it's not to get into macroecon, and honestly, my understanding is not even that great, but the Federal Reserve is a different thing from like the U.S. Treasury, which is like a different thing from like the budget of the United States federal government. Technically, to say that like the Federal Reserve can't like pump money into the economy or spend money from the government, it doesn't really work that way. But this is retarded. So this guy is retarded. So wait, but okay.
Now you can say that, oh, that's Trump's fault. That was passed under a bipartisan agenda. All sorts of people wanted this. All sorts of special interests.
Like there is no bipartisan agenda to pass legislation to change rates in the Federal Reserve. That's not how the Federal Reserve rates aren't passed by Congress. It's a group of private banks headed by a chairman that's nominated by the president or appointed by the president, nominated, maybe confirmed by the Senate. I don't know. Somebody, the president gets him in there somehow. But there's not like you don't vote up or down on rates or on quantitative easing or like it doesn't come from Congress. It's not bipartisan. It's not.
Interest groups wanted this. Now, absent C-19 and the lockdowns, Trump's economy was fucking roaring. And you have only just now successfully pivoted away again from the point that you have not addressed what Kamala Harris's policies are going to be to lower gas prices, lower food prices, lower the inflation rates, or any of these. You just say, well, you're just going to build 3 million new homes. Yay, Pisco. Can you answer the questions which have been asked to you?
When you say the Federal Reserve pumped it up, are you saying lowered interest rates?
No, Pisco.
What do you mean by
if you
what
increase,
the Federal Reserve
I'm going to explain.
Yeah.
Then let me explain. If you increase the money supply, you inflate the money supply, right?
How do they increase the money supply?
Bro, answer my question first.
I agree that
right. So if the United States government, calls for billions of dollars from the Fed for the Fed to print billions, it's going to increase the money supply, thus increase inflation. This is basic, Pisco.
Does the Federal Reserve make appropriations? Who makes appropriations?
That would be Congress.
Congress, good job.
Okay, so the Federal Reserve didn't do shit that you're pointing to. What you're pointing to are acts of Congress, isn't it? Not Federal Reserve policy?
No, that's not all that happens, as you know.
Bro.
Do you want me to answer real quick? The M2 money supply, the M2 money supply that went up 50% is from the Federal Reserve. That means the Federal Reserve increased the amount of dollars in circulation by about 50% since like 2020. Is what you're really trying to tell me is not $1 of that creation was except what Congress told them they had to do in specific bills? Is that your argument?
What I'm saying is the Federal Reserve to increase the money supply typically will lower interest rates. That's how Fed policy works. When you're talking about taking out loans, the government sells things called bonds. These are
lowering interest rates increases the money supply, Pisco. And if it increases the money supply, it creates inflation, Pisco.
But you didn't point to
you fucking idiot. I just explained this to you 5 times, you fucking moron.
Andrew, you sound really upset right now.
God, what a dummy.
You did not.
I literally just explained this to you.
You did not point to Federal Reserve policy just then. What you did.
I literally just
You're banging on the table. You're banging on the table because I probably told you.
Okay, Pisco was interrupting Andrew a lot, but now Andrew is interrupting Pisco a lot. So it's got to be like figured out, guys.
Pisco.
Oh wow.
Does that increase?
I can't.
Does it increase the money supply? Does it increase the money supply when they lower the interest rate?
The Federal Reserve is a central bank.
You're not going to answer the question, right?
The Federal Reserve is a central bank. It is not the one who is.
Really, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it sounds like you're having
central bank.
It sounds like you're having some difficulty. So I'm going to explain it to you. Okay. So the Federal Reserve doesn't like make appropriations or take out loans. The people who take out loans are the federal government. All right. So when Congress writes a law, an appropriation by law, they will need to fund it, and they fund it through the Treasury. And if the Treasury wants to loan money, wants to borrow money, they will issue bonds. The Federal Reserve affects the money supply in different ways. So I'm asking you, what Federal Reserve policy was causing the inflationary problem?
So I'm going to tell you again for the 14th time: if the Fed lowers the interest rates, it's going to increase the money supply.
Okay.
Oh shit! Wait, is Pisco setting a trap right now? Hold on. Oh no. Federal funds rate, because the interest rates have been higher under Biden than they have been for Trump the entirety cumulatively over the entire term. So this argument is completely backwards. No. Trump was in for 2016. We would have said Trump came into office on it's 2017, right? And he would have been president from 2017 to, and then he leaves January of 2021. So Trump also, I'm pretty sure interest rates have a lagging effect on the economy as well. I believe, like if you start bumping interest rates up, I think it takes a while for it to impact the economy, which is one of the reasons why I think the Federal Reserve tries to preempt where they think the economy is going. Because if you wait for a thing to happen and then they start raising or lowering rates, it takes a while for the effects to filter down into the economy. So Trump was he was coming off of historically incredibly low interest rates. The rates never got bumped up even that much under his administration. They didn't even make it to 2.5%. Before they tanked again until January 2021. Biden has probably, if you were to integrate these two curves, my guess is Biden has probably had much higher interest rates for the totality of his administration than Trump had, for sure, right? So if we're using interest rates here as an argument for why inflation happens, then he has this completely incorrectly done, right? Trump also pressured the Federal Reserve for lower interest rates, which you would expect him to do again too. But well, let's see where we go from here.
It's Pisco, my turn, Pisco, my turn, Pisco, stop.
Oh, Pisco is going to do it. He's going to say who had lower interest rates.
Pisco,
okay,
my turn.
wait, stop. Okay, wait, we're pausing this. Wait, I'm gonna meet you both. Okay, Andrew, you got 20 seconds. Pisco, you got 20 seconds. And everybody else gets to talk because I think everybody's sick of hearing
I want my
about
last question. I want my last question.
Yeah, that's nice, Pisco.
Okay, wait, stop. Okay,
Still spurging, Pisco.
Okay, I'm muting you both. This is the order. This is how it's gonna go. Pisco, you got 10 seconds to ask a question, and 10 seconds to say whatever else you want to say. Andrew, then you get 10 seconds after, and 10 seconds after that. If anything else is said that's like, oh my god, I want to respond to that, it'll have to be somebody else. It'll just have to be somebody else. Because Turk wants to talk. Okay.
Andrew just said that the Fed policy.
Why did you just let him filibuster?
What?
He should get banned. He should just be blacklisted. Jesus Christ. This is intentional also, by the way. I think Andrew realizes he's walked into a trap and his whole argument is bullshit. They just got both hard muted and I think he realizes that he's himself because the rates are very high right now and everybody knows about it. That's one of the things people complain about. Holy shit, a mortgage is so expensive. I'm pretty sure prime lending for mortgages is downstream from federal funds rate. Everybody knows interest rates are really high right now. I think he knows he's himself, and that's why he started spurging the microsecond his mic was unmuted, because he knows he's walked himself. Because he can't just say, oh, okay, I was wrong there, because he has to unwind so much of the argument that he just made now if he admits that he's wrong here. I have no clue how he's going to respond to Pisco. He could never back off this point because he's going to lose. He has to unwind so much of his argument to do so, but let's see.
Have to be somebody else. It'll just have to be somebody else. Because Turk wants to talk. Okay.
Andrew just said that the Fed policy.
Why did you just let him filibuster?
What?
I was in the middle of my answer. You let the guy filibuster.
I'm sorry, it's chaos. You're gonna have to work with it. Work with it, Andrew. Work with it. He's gonna ask a question, then you're gonna respond. It just said you're gonna be able to respond, Andrew. You're gonna respond after. You're not debating the moderator. Either deal with the root, you gotta deal with the order because there's chaos. Okay, you're both dominating. There's 6 other guests.
Is he going to leave? He might leave. That's his saving grace right now. He's got a good reason to as well, right? Oh, the moderators are ganging up on me, just like he probably coped with Trump. I don't know if he made that cope for Trump or not, but like.
Think about the audience. I gotta think about the other people. He's gonna get 20 seconds, then you'll be able to respond. You'll be able to talk, Andrew, and you'll be talking more than everybody else still. Pisco, go.
Okay.
Andrew just pointed to the Federal Reserve policy of lowering interest rates as the cause for global inflation, and he knows now, and that's why he's trying to stop me from talking, that who was pushing for the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates in the lead up to the election was none other than Donald J. Trump. That's my statement. He can talk.
Oh, no, you missed a big one. It is true. Oh, no, he gave him an out. It is true that Trump pressured him, but it's also factually true that Trump enjoyed lower interest rates. And coming into his administration, the United States economy had been running off of historically low interest rates. Low interest rates plus massive government deficits, the largest budget deficits that we'd had up to the history of the United States, up to Donald Trump's administration. 2 huge sources, potentially, of inflation, both things that Andrew Wilson doesn't like. Low interest rates, printing more money, and high government spending, both things that Donald Trump did. Of course his economy was booming. Bro, he was massive deficit spending and enjoying massively low interest rates. Pisco's close enough though, but we'll see if we get here. Hold on.
Andrew?
Yeah, so again, if you increase the amount of money supply, when you lower the corporate tax, that's good. You want them to borrow tons and tons of money. You want tons of printing when the influx is going to corporations which are going to expand. That's an ROI. That's a return on investment. You want that.
This is retarded. We're gonna do this like last point and then I'm done. I don't like listening to this guy talk about anything. Okay.
Want them to borrow tons and tons of money.
That's my statement. He can talk.
Andrew?
Yeah.
I don't even know what the fuck we're saying here. Hold on.
So again, if you increase the amount of money supply, when you lower the corporate tax, that's good. You want them to borrow tons and tons of money. You want
lower the interest rates while you increase you lower interest rates and then lower corporate tax rates, and that's good.
Same, he can talk.
Andrew?
Yeah, so again, if you increase the amount of money supply, when you lower the corporate tax, that's good. You want them to borrow tons and tons of money. You want tons of printing when the influx is going to corporations which are going to expand. That's an ROI. That's a return on investment. You want.
But it's none of this connects. I don't know what he thinks is. I do know what he thinks is happening because I used to think this when I was a Ron Paul supporter. I think Andrew's conception here is that the Federal Reserve is printing money and then like lending that to businesses but that's not the connection. It's not the connection here. And that like a lower corporate tax rate makes them borrow more money. These things, I don't even know if these things would ever even connect. I'm sure like in a very roundabout way they would, but it's not like I'm paying taxes on borrowed money or I don't even know what.
that. Under Biden, this is a totally different situation. He did exactly the opposite. He has been strangling corporations of much needed money. So has the entire administration. So all you're doing, Pisco, you're just shifting the goalpost again. I knew exactly what you were going to say. I was happy to respond to it before you ever even said it.
So then Pisco, the response, oh fuck, there are so many responses, but they're not. I think of responses, but none of this is in good faith. Because then the response is, oh, okay, so then printing more money is good, but only when we give it to corporations? Why? What do you think corporations do with that money? Reinvest it into their businesses? Yeah, but what does that mean? They expand their businesses. How? Well, by spending it on goods and services, which does what? Well, okay. It's more money chasing the same amount of goods, which is earlier the definition you gave for inflation. So then that would also be inflationary, right? Like, it's just not, but.
Turk.
So this exchange in the debate is a prime example of what happened in the debate that happened the other night. People kept going to the past and Trump's policies and why Trump and Orange Man are bad instead of actually going and asking the different people on the stage pointed questions about their specific plan going into 2024. Pisco, I wanted to talk to you, but I don't want to hear your voice or Andrew's anymore. I want to ask the panel, do we feel like we got to learn more about Kamala Harris's actual preferred policies and some of the details? Because like Joe mentioned earlier, there's a lot of things that wasn't done in the previous administration. She wasn't really pressed on some of the guts of her proposals. So it's like, do we really feel like both of the candidates were questioned adequately about their current proposals going into 2024?
Yeah, nobody answered my question earlier about opportunity economy. No one was able to find that. I'm very happy to hear your answer.
Well, she defined it with different policies, like expanding the child tax credit, the $25,000 grant for first-time home buyers.
What do you want?
Yo, just real quick. I'll be out of your hair.
Yeah.
Because you don't need to watch the rest of this, whatever. But the reason that point to me was so important is because he's totally bullshitting here. He's completely 100% bullshitting here. He talked about how the Federal Reserve was the reason why we had a global inflation crisis across everything. Mm-hmm. And the first thing he did too was point to acts of Congress and how.
No, yeah, that's what I'm going. He doesn't have any idea how, and he thinks like the Federal Reserve directly either makes policy for the United States or directly like gives money to. He probably thinks that like companies go to the Federal Reserve to take out a loan, or like it's just he doesn't understand any of the.
He has no fucking clue, and then he says that. When I correctly say that the Federal Reserve affects the money supply in other ways, he says, yeah, they lower interest rates. But of course, as you pointed out, and as I pointed out, or I guess what I said was Trump was calling for lower interest rates, but he in fact did enjoy lower interest rates and low interest rates during his presidential administration.
Yeah.
And so it's either the case that you have to like cut back on what you said, but he's trying to drive this line and like, oh no, if you combine it with corporate tax cuts, then it isn't inflationary.
But it doesn't.
I don't even understand what that means.
It's a nonsense statement. It's not even wrong. Like it's like saying that like there were. How can you think the economy was bad when for 327 days in Arizona last year it didn't rain? Like it's a nonsense statement that is not connected in any way, size, shape, or form with anything. Also, there's a million things. Andrew, I don't know if you noticed this. Andrew doesn't know anything about economics, right? He just repeats things. Like he argued with me in a debate once that if we kicked every woman out of the job market, then it would be good because all the men would earn twice as much. That's unironically, he defended that statement virulently. Like I kind of laughed at him, and then he made fun of me for not having a good response to him because his argument was like airtight. Like he's fucking retarded. What did he say earlier? Oh God, there was another. There was one other incredibly fucking retarded argument that he just made. Oh, that the Federal Reserve, the USD being like the world reserve currency caused inflation for like what? It's just retarded. It's stupid. Yeah.
I have no idea where at all he's getting that from, why he's saying that. Rob isn't defending him here because he knows it's fucking bullshit. The Federal Reserve isn't what caused inflation, but he has to die on this point because he cannot give any single ground. He can't be like, oh, I meant the acts of Congress. That's what I expected him to do and say, oh, I misspoke. I didn't say I didn't mean the Federal Reserve. Yeah. But he had to die on this hill because he's a piece of shit. And just so you know, he goes he gets a little quiet. He's very self-conscious about this point. No one pointed this out to him, by the way. He got absolutely blown out on this and the rest of the debate as well. But later in the debate discussion, he gets so triggered. He says that he starts arguing with the moderator and Dylan. He says Dylan Burns has Down syndrome.
Damn.
And starts making fun of people with disabilities. And then he says Dylan Burns will never have kids because he's gay. And so this is the kind of scumbag that we're dealing with. He's a piece of garbage. and he's stupid. That's the worst of it, right? He's a dumb guy. He's misusing words like entailment. You don't need to get into this in the discussion, but he'll say, that's an entailment, Pisco. That's an entailment. When it's not at all an entailment. It's all surface level, pseudo-intellectual bullshit. And at the end, he's like, yeah, for me to debate Pisco, he's going to have to pay me, because that's the rules that Steven set up. That in order for me to debate someone, they need to have a certain number of subscribers, or you, Pisco, need to debate me. That's the only way that I'll debate you. So he's a coward. He's a piece of shit. He does every single debate tactic that's accused
of me,
of other people.
Yeah, he is the debate bro. He has no substance for anything, and he constantly is like, "That's actually an argumentative ad fallacium ad absurdum." Like he'll do this unironically.
It was hilarious in the aftermath of your conversation of insurrection when you blew him out of the water. He's like, I have a secret insurrection definition to tomfooleries, but I'm gonna wait to use that one. I'm not gonna reveal that one until my next debate on the definition of insurrection. Mm-hmm. He is the cringiest loser, and he's a fucking idiot. And that's all I have to say.
You also I don't know if you noticed, it needs to start being called out more. There has been a blatant abuse of the word whataboutism constantly. Yeah. Whataboutism is a thing when you divert attention from a particular thing because you don't want responsibility for it. It doesn't mean that you can never bring up an example of anything else ever to make a point. If somebody says like, well, isn't there a lot of inflation under Biden right now, and that's because of the monetary policy? And you're like, well, hold on, weren't inflation rates literally, weren't the interest rates literally lower under Donald Trump? That's whataboutism. No, wait, it's not whataboutism. I'm demonstrating that there's not a direct connection between your 2 points. Yeah, every single time you ever try to make a point involving like an example or whatever, it's, oh wait, whataboutism, that's whataboutism. What? That's not true at all. It's so fucking annoying. Yeah, holy shit.
The dynamics of this debate are wild. The top left, you have Gibbs, who's like,
oh, I know this guy. He's worthless. Statistics. He's not even worth having a debate. He's worse than Fabian.
Yeah. Yes. But he also weighs down later on in the panel. I actually feel bad for Rob because he starts biting all the baits that we're setting out for him. Mm-hmm. And he's saying, yeah, Texas should secede.
Okay.
He starts talking about, or he said maybe we should secede, maybe not now, but like we're a separate republic, all that stuff. So he's doing all that stuff. Rob is like misrepresenting statistics about real wages and saying like we shouldn't believe any of that, and saying essentially that real wages haven't gone up since before the pandemic, which is not true. They spiked up right when all the poor people were fired. Yeah. But so he's like misunderstanding that.
Yeah, because it's median wages, right? Yeah. If I've got 10 people at a company and I fire the 9 poorest, my mean and median wages have increased dramatically, but it's not good.
Of course.
Yeah.
He's misrepresenting the labor participation rate and not understanding that, of course, it relates to
age demographics in an economy is important as you get older people aging out.
He says to sort of downplay the state of the economy, he says, well, all the new jobs are going to people who are born outside of the country and not people born inside the country. That's because people who are born inside the country are disproportionately boomers and older and people who are aging out again. Sure. And so it's just every single point, and you can kind of get into it in every thing that Rob says in his long diatribes. But on economics, it's all feels based. It's all ask the people around you. How are they doing? Ask this and that, because they know that, and I'm sorry to say, I don't know how else to say it. It's a vibe session. There are some people for sure in particular sectors and particular goods where there's some real angst, some real pain. For example, housing. That's one area where even people who have like moderate incomes or people who want a home are having difficulty. It's a big problem. Mm-hmm. That's why Kamala Harris has a plan for it. And you'll hear, you don't watch this whole thing, but when you start to say like, well, what's wrong with building more houses? What's wrong with the government building more houses? They're like, where are they going to get all the land? What about the zoning laws? Who's going to make they start talking about all the logistics of building homes as if the government can't solve that problem. It won't be trivial, but you'll need to have public and private partnerships. But they start inventing reasons to hate this policy just because of who said it. Imagine if Trump said, we're going to build all the houses, the greatest amount of houses. They would be in love with it. Yeah. They would say it's the greatest fucking thing, that he's a builder. It's the best thing since sliced bread. And so this panel, this format, it's not conducive to an honest discussion, but it's more than just the format. It's the people behind the arguments, and it's the arguments themselves, and it's the character of the leader they support.
Yep. Yeah.
Love you, dude.
Love you too. Be careful.